Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with Phreak, which I am super excited for because I shared this anecdote with Phreak about how I met him back in season 2 at a DreamHack event, and that felt like such a real moment for me because I watch all the champion spotlights, I listened to Phreak cast the whole DreamHack, the World Championship season 1. Phreak was the big deal, he's the man. And when I finally met him, no, for sure, bro, your passion is contagious, and I remember it. That moment for me back in season 2 when I met you, it felt like I made it. We were shit in the tournament, but it felt like I made it somehow. It felt like such a big moment in my career, and I wanted to share that with you. Of course, I'm excited to be speaking with you. You are working on the design team, and you've been a part of the League of Legends scene since the inception. On this beautiful day, how are you doing today, Phreak? Let's start there.
Doing well. Yeah, it's Saturday afternoon. I know it's super late for you. We're getting started. It's almost midnight already for you. And you just did a 5-hour co-stream of LEC and then an hour of here's where the teams went and lost and whatnot. So I know you're on the end of a long day, but I'm doing well at least.
That's cool. I wanted to ask you, now when you're working on the design team, are the work hours a lot more reasonable? Because when you're casting, you have to go the Saturdays and everything is blocked off and everything all that crazy. Is it more regular, more human, so to speak?
It's certainly more regular, I suppose. It's actually, I would say it's almost certainly more work. So for LC, especially if you're a playcaster, it's not your job to analyze teams beforehand. And so my actual required duties, if I'm not filling in on the dive or some other shoot, is there is a 1.5 hour meeting to start the week, and then I cast. And those days are about 3-ish hours on camera. Okay, you're there an hour too early. You leave pretty much as soon as you're done with the game. So on a whole, of just strictly required work is 12 hours a week.
Okay.
It's not actually that busy of a job on regular season. And of course it's up to you how much you're going to prep, how much you want to do. The patch rundowns I've done for the last 4 years, to me, I consider part of my prep work. And so, it's not like I'm billing hours on it, whatever, but I would make sure I stay up the game that way, play League, watch other teams and whatnot. So, there's more that goes into it in general, but here it's I have a regular, 40-hour work week. I try not to stay late. I try to be pretty healthy about how much time I spend to it. Certainly, if I wanted to work 80 hours a week, no one's going to stop me. And if I wanted to get even more done, I could and spend more time iterating and thinking about stuff. But so I would say the work is harder, or at least more time consuming, at least during the regular season sort of frame of reference. But I am excited at the same time to not have to fly to Berlin for 5 weeks to live in a hotel room to cast Worlds. I enjoyed the travel a lot more when we were actually on location and we were all going somewhere. And so even if it was so for example, going to Paris or something like that, it's gonna have a better sort of tourist environment than going to Wuhan, right? And so it's okay, well, some of those trips are gonna be tougher and some are gonna be easier. But since we're not the local language in most countries that we do MSI and Worlds for, we cast with the LEC studio instead.
Yes.
And Medic and Vettis and Co, they're at home. They live there already. So they're at home, and then here's me and Azael and Kobe and Co, and we're flying in, and we're an hour away from them, so hanging out's really tough. And then we taxi in for 45 minutes to go cast games. So not having to do that is something I'm looking forward to. It's a little annoying, right? But it's only a few weeks out of the year. But yeah, it's actually more hours though. I think it's more work on a regular cadence though.
Okay, I see. And I imagine as well, generally speaking, I can see from how you talk about the game that you love the game. So I guess just naturally you're just gaining more information by just playing the game, right? Because I think that's also important when you're working with the game. I feel almost borderline you can notice in terms of how some casters develop if they're actively playing the game and engaging with the game, and when they're not. I can see that kind of progression. I think it's super important to kind of just consume the game at an all-time basis. I can also relate completely. When I was back at Worlds, I remember 2015, and I was staying at this Best Western that was right next to an IHOP, and I was staying there for 4 weeks, and the analyst desk was in North America, and then all the castles were in Europe. It was fun because it was just a new experience, but definitely staying at the Best Western at some point, just trying to work with the Wi-Fi on the hotel was definitely a rough one.
For sure.
Could you break down how a kind of a week looks like in the day of in the life of a game designer?
Yeah, sure. So first thing I'm going to say is it sort of works in alternating weeks in a sense because we patch every 2 weeks. The way that like agile software development is structured is in 2-week sprints. Okay. And so for example, like I'm going to come into work on Monday, and so I'll take a step back first. Every morning and every evening, there's playtests. So ideally, it's 10 playtests a week, which is, that's 10 hours of your 40-hour work week, is a playtest at 10:30 a.m., which then turns into discussion and then lunch, and a playtest at like 5 p.m., which is going to turn into like a little bit of minor work done and then go to dinner. And that's like, okay, who has changes coming in for champion designers? It's, get the newest iteration of their champion. If we're playtesting any new modes or whatnot going on, or if there's some kind of ARM systems changes, like the modes team will do their own stuff, champions team will do their stuff. Sometimes there's crossover and whatnot. But instantly 10 hours a week is in playtesting. And so, like for example, I just checked in some severe nerfs and thresh buffs on Friday evening, and so on Monday we're going to work. Hey, I want tests on both Samir and Thresh. I am probably at some point taking on a slightly longer project on Rumble. Getting him less mid lane skewed and probably bring back Rumble jungle. And like that's gonna be a really big change. That's gonna require like a full patchwork of like playtesting. It's not gonna be 13.4, maybe it'll be 13.5, but like, that kind of stuff is like, well, we need a lot of reps on it. And so every week has 2 playtests a day, basically. So okay, we're gonna come in on Monday, and other than the playtest meeting or the playtest in general, we're gonna meet for a meeting called State of the Game, which is every 2 weeks on Monday. And it's like, okay, 13.3 has been live for a bit. What stands out? Like, what did we hit? What did we miss? For example, I nerfed Kassadin to 13.3 because we looked at the data from 13.1. Like, this wasn't enough. His ban rate's still very high. His run rate's still very high. We should go again at Kassadin. And so we nerfed him twice in a row because though the first thing was good and it certainly made movement, we decided to go again and go harder. And so it's like, okay, what happened? I need to rebuff Alistair. My changes from 13.3 actually ended up lowering his win rate. So I grabbed some Alistair changes. Like that would have been a state of the game otherwise if I wasn't proactive about it. And so that's like short iteration. Because also keep in mind that we're going to lock that patch 13.4 on Wednesday. So on Thursday, we get like 5 days, including the weekend, for like data collection, and then we make like quick calls of like low scope, low tested complexity, high confidence, like just change 3 numbers in an obvious direction, and then that's your change. Like don't, low risk being the operative point here, of like that's what Monday is right before the patch, and then we lock our changes within the next 2 days, and then in a week and a half, 13.4 will come out with some more changes. Okay, so Monday and Tuesday are a lot of sort of like that meeting, and then iterating out of those. Like it's called State of the Game, and it's get quick reaction stuff in. Over the course of time, so then what's going to happen afterwards is once we lock 13.4, which is going to be on Wednesday, we're going to have sprint planning. And so sprint planning is like, okay, what are you going to do for the next 2 weeks? So for example, for my last 2 weeks, we're ending the 13.4 sprint. I was taking a longer look at the item Radiant Virtue. I nerfed it in 13.3. I could probably nerf it more. It's still going to be pretty strong on tanks. It definitely got weaker on enchanters. It's maybe okay for the short term, but we might revisit it, right? But it was okay. Well, can you take a longer look at Radiant Virtue? Because I think the tank items that came out in the preseason update were largely really, really good. Jack Show is really popular. Heartstone is really popular. I really love Heartstone. I think it's a really, really good item. But for its power level, Radiant Virtue wasn't very popular. And I mean, power is a good way to like buy popularity. Hey, go play the OP thing, right? People play things that are buffed. That just makes natural sense. But in terms of people sticking with it or enjoying it or whatever, it's like, well, are people only buying Radiant Virtue now because it's overpowered? Or is it actually a cool item? It's okay, well, can we investigate, can Radiant Virtue be an item that we make more interesting? And so I don't think I'm particularly good at creative work. I think I'm really good at like iterating on stuff. And that's like really comfortable for me. But so for most of the last week, I've been like, okay, how can we make Radiant Virtue a better item? Where it can still fill this like team fight fantasy tank sort of niche. Where like Jackcho is like, well, I'm just durable. Heartsteel has a cool minigame that's obvious about it. Iceborne Gauntlet has a pretty obvious minigame it's about. Radiant Virtue kind of is just like, what's a cool team fight tank item? And all right, let me go think of what can I give my team? What can I do to opponents? What are the ways I trigger it? At some point, we'll pitch what I think are like the leading avenues. And if they're worth tracking down, then like, okay, we can try to get some, a VFX artist or a sound, designer or something, and, work towards iterating or implementing a, new and hopefully improved version of Radiant Virtue. So, we're going to do sprint planning on Wednesday, and I'm going to be like, I would like to spend about 3 days putting together a Rumble, like, small scope change list to make him a passable jungler and make him a better top laner, because people would, like, Rumble's pick rate has always been largely higher in top lane than mid lane. Like, in general, Rumble players are top laners. Despite the fact that he's been a better mid laner for 8 years straight. Like, power level be damned, people would rather play him as a top laner, but he's not good there. But we can't buff him because he would be overpowered in mid lane. So it has to be more than simple buffs, right? And I think Rumble Jungle is actually a completely like fine champion to exist. And I would like to make Rumble Jungle actually good for the first time in League history. But anyway, but moving on, right? It's like, and some of this is a little bit self-directed. We had a meeting last Thursday where we basically pitched a bunch of sort of low-scope projects. Like, hey, here's champs that like are not breaking the game. They're not so we have to nerf them for play. They're not so we have to nerf them for solo queue. They're not so weak that we have to buff them. But like, I pitched Samira nerfs because like, hey, Samira has been like pretty high win rate for a while. It's probably fine, but her ban rate has gone from like 15% to 40% over the last 2 months. So she's really quickly growing in like as a problem, and until her ban rate is like 50% in matches plus, or win rate like 53% for regular players, that doesn't like trigger alarm bells where we like really have to act. But we're like, we probably should nerf Samira. Like, growing ban rate's a pretty big issue, and players are kind of frustrated by her. So there's some level of human choice going on there.
Okay.
Anyway, over the course of time, the next 2 weeks, there's going to be meetings. There's a bunch of like design like come together and talk about stuff meetings. So every week or two, a designer at Riot will give a presentation about like something they worked on. So there's a woman who like led a bunch of Hearthstone sets, and she's at Riot, and she talked about like what she learned working on Hearthstone sets. Okay. And like that was really interesting. There's a presentation from a designer who I think he's a designer, maybe he's a VFX or something like that, but he talked about like, hey, we have a relatively new system of how to buff, how to hook up like VFX on champions. So for example, Malphite, really old champion, right? And Malphite W gives him an auto attack buff. And the way that used to be coded was like, when he presses W, like play this particle and play it for 20 seconds or something, and then when the W ends, tell the particle to end. But also, by the way, there's a champion with Nautilus where he has hooking. And so when he casts Hook, it tells the game turn off particles. But if you Zonia's while hooking, you're no longer hooking anymore, and so the particles show up and look really weird because that's how it's all hooked up, because technology. And it's like, well, we have a new way of hooking up like passive buff. So like Ari's eyes glow during her ultimate, and she has like different stuff under her free base and how many ult charges she has. And it's like, we have a new flow for this where it's like, hey, while I have Ari ult up, play this particle. And while I have 1, 2, or 3 charges of it, play this different particle. And it doesn't have to ask about like she's casting Q or doing whatever. It's like, you have a lot like better statements around that. So, like, that was a presentation that I was on, that I like listened in on Friday. Okay. So there's several hours a week of meetings like that where it's just like, here's how our tech has been updated. Here's stuff I've learned. When I have a like good Rumble change list, surfacing it in front of like the team leads. That's going to be like one of the things is it's like 3 every 2 weeks is like service what you're working on that like maybe you want eyes on or want help with or whatever. But there's like a lot of sort of built-in rituals for like remaining collaborative and whatnot. And then all the rest of the time, I would say probably about half of time is sort of like spoken for in general, probably about accurate. And the other 20 hours a week are sort of open for like actually like working on what you're working on or any sort of free selection stuff. Okay. So there's my really long answer of how that all works out.
No, that's very insightful. That's super cool that there's presentations and there's ways to engage with one another. Like the main question, like not the main question, but something that was on my mind is, how do you make sure that if you have multiple game designers working at the same time, how do you make sure that things don't collide in terms of changes?
So we're pretty good about like saying what we want to work on overall. So both with state of the game, which is the short-term stuff, or longer-term target selection or sprint planning. It's like, hey, here are things that we want to tackle. So one of the designers, for example, is working on the fact that jungle is really overpowered. And also really, really skewed towards early ganking. Everyone's Maul ringing everywhere, like
yes,
that's
yes.
the meta is to Maul ring, and just can't bot the entire game. And it's like, okay, well, right now jungle is tuned pretty heavily towards ganking and away from farming. And so Phlox, who sits directly behind me, he's working on jungle stuff. So in 13.3, there's really, really minor stuff around like the flat gold per treat and a bit more XP in the jungle. And this was because we decided we wanted to do this work, like in that like previous Monday's state of the game meeting. And it's like, well, you have 2 days to ship stuff before 13.3 lock, so it's going to be low scope, it's going to be high confidence, and it's going to be relatively low impact. And this is not that we're never going to do anything more to jungle, but it was like we made the call that yes, we need to keep nerfing jungle. Like we've seen enough pro play, we've seen enough like high elo metagame evolution that we're like, the game is too much this way, let's make a call. And so he's working on even more stuff around this. I don't want to spoil anything he's working on. It'll change around, but at some point, it'll be on PvE and then it'll be on live, and he's going to keep working on jungle power level and satisfaction, stuff like that. So it's like, I'm not going to touch jungle monsters or anything, right? Like he's going to go do that. I'm not going to mess with jungle items. I'm not going to do any of that stuff because that's his thing, and he's got that going on. Okay. There are about 8 game designers on the Summoner's Rift team. Not everyone is doing live balance. Some people are doing much longer and larger projects. Again, stuff that I will not spoil, but like, Summoner's Rift is more than just game balance, right? It handles preseason, it handles most mid-scope champion reworks, it handles all systems updates. So if we are going to, make Infinity Edge work with 40% crit chance, like I know it's a balance update, but like the game entirely as a system interacts with the fact that I works on 2 items now. And like that's pretty meaningful if we're gonna add new items to the game. When we added tank mythics, right? Radiant Ritual and Heartsteel exist out of nowhere, injections out of nowhere. That's a Summoner's Rift team, right? Yes. If I'm going to make Abyssal Mask have ability power and make it an AP bruiser item instead of a tank item, instead of building out a catalyst or whatever, like that's Summoner's Rift team. And yeah, you can call it game balance in the way that you can call Chemtech Drake game balance, but right, there's more going on than just game balance. But yeah, if like we're gonna rework how a dragon works or how the map works or that kind of stuff, like there could be a game designer on that, and it's like, okay, they're iterating on, I'll just make up a champion Varus. It's like, okay, well, I'm probably gonna do any Varus changes unless there's reason to. August is doing a small rework to Kale's ultimate, but that's going to be in a couple of months because getting the VFX art and everything else done in time, like that requires time. It's that takes more time than just like changing 3 numbers in a back-end tool, and now Kale or ult works this way, right? Like, well, it needs a visual update so it lines up with the gameplay pattern, yes, right? Yes. And that just takes time, iteration, whatnot. So we're waiting on that. Do we want to buff Kale in the meantime? And it's like, oh, I can choose to do that, and so I like shipped a very small Kale buff in 13.3. So it's a matter of just like not being on their champions and like letting them work on their own stuff. So yeah, like no one's doing a Thresh mid scope while I'm doing Thresh buffs typically. Okay. Or if they were, it's like, oh hey, this is going to take me 3 months. Do you want to ship a small Thresh buff first, and then like ensuring we're doing the right things version control wise, where we're not crushing someone else's work. Okay. So there's a bit of like coordination required, but also the team isn't so big. There's not that much overlap.
How big is the team? How many are you guys? Like who's shipping out the patch notes? Like who how many are
sure. I would say in terms of like quick iteration patch note stuff, it's around 4 to 5 of us.
Okay.
It's going to depend. So obviously I'm doing it. I would say yeah. So I would say most of the champion balance changes and item changes in 13.3, it was roughly 5 game designers were touching it. And again, other people are doing longer term stuff and they're doing other stuff on the team that's not just live game balance. If at some point, this is my understanding, I've been on the team for like a month, right? So like if at some point we get later into the year, I don't know when it's going to kick off in earnest, but like, the Summoner's Rift team is building preseason 2024 in earnest. There are people who like their full-time job is just iterating on preseason, and they will not do a single patch note for, I'm going to make up a number, 4 months. Oh, wow, okay. And all this stuff's going to be in November, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to, again, make up numbers. There's 3 of that 8-person team who are literally never going to touch patch notes for the rest of the year or whatever, until you see it in, 13.24 or whatever. Again, don't know the actual patch note for that, the patch date for that, but I have been told that like I'm going to remain on the live balance pod. To be fair, I definitely am pretty weak at our tools still. I took a look at Thresh's Q and E script yesterday. Whoo, man, do I barely understand what's going on there. It's like you cast Thresh E, it then like that casts a different spell. You go into that script, that casts a different spell. You go into that script, that also casts a different spell. Thresh E is 4 spells nested on top of each other, like a nesting doll. Also, the way it looks up damage data, because Thresh is a really old champion, it is done in like a really old way. So it used to be that League of Legends champions would calculate their ability power ratios in their spell script itself. So when it like goes to execute and says go deal damage, right above that, it would say, okay, get my spell level, get my ability power, get this coefficient from my data file, get this base damage from my data file, and by the way, it's hard-coded so that like level 1 damage is 20, level 2 damage is 40, level 3, and so it's like it's cross-referencing all these things, and it's like, okay, now math all together, okay, now deal damage according to what I mathed out. The new way of doing it is in the data file, you say, hey, Thresh's E base damage is 20 plus 35 per level, and it spits it out for you so you can see it really cleanly. Okay, cool. My ability power I'm going to define, my AP ratio I'm going to define is like 0.8 or whatever. Okay, and I'm going to make a math block in my data file that says, okay, add base damage to this defined variable called AP ratio and multiply it by my stat, my AP. And then I can basically just like right-click copy, paste it into the script, and the game just says, okay, just take the damage calculation and then use that as the damage dealt. That like it's much easier because right I went to go buff Thresh's E damage for the first time since I became a game designer, and I had to go through 4 spells to change all the numbers around to like update things correctly, to like make sure it was doing it right. Whereas now it's like, okay, cool, I can deprecate all the old lines and just say, no, here's the damage calculation. So now, by the way, the tooltip for the longest time has already read like a damage calculator sort of like file, but that was not how the spell itself calculated the damage. So I had to make sure anytime I updated numbers, and by the way, Lee Sin Q is a bug right now in 13.3 because of this reason, where the AD ratio on Q is defined differently than the tooltip reads it. So I have to change that number in both places. I fixed it now, so in 13.4 it won't be that way anymore. But like, okay, well, anytime I update a champion, if they were made before 2015, I probably have to do that. And as I'm like learning the tools, like I have to go through and do all those things. So like, it's why it's very easy for those to be these bugs, because just like human error will happen, and like there's just like a thing called coefficient that you're like, is the script reading the coefficient block, or is it reading this thing down here where the tooltip is? And I just have to like guess, or just change them both every time. But at a certain point, I just want to rescript stuff. But and like I'm getting more and more confident doing that, to where like I like fixed Thresh E the first try and it worked, and I was like, nice. I've managed to like comment out the right things and put the numbers in as well. So yeah, it's like that's just the whole process. So anyway, this is all to say that I'm probably going to be on short-term stuff for a while, because I can barely read individual spell scripts sometimes.
Okay. Is that why some spells, like maybe I'm crazy because I'm grabbing this from memory. Some skills, while the projectile is in the air, as you skill up the skill, let's say you level up, some skills do more damage and some don't. Is this why?
So I'm not 100% certain. I would guess so. So it's going to depend on how it's defined. So for example, let's say, for example, so one thing that exists is there's a like some things will just like update every quarter second. So you say, okay, every quarter second, I want you to ask the game how much total health I have, and then give that to me as ability power. This is how Demonic Embrace works, right? Every quarter second, it's going to ask what's my max health. And then, it'll probably refresh when I level up. It'll probably refresh when I buy an item. But, like, Demonic Embrace doesn't know how to cast Radiant Virtue, right? Like, Demonic Embrace is dumb. It's just nothing. And, I mean, maybe there's actually stuff where, like, I can tell the game, no, I've updated my stats. I cast Radiant Virtue. I've updated my stats. Trust me, like, do this thing. But it's like, does that happen every time I get an overgrowth stack from killing a minion? Like, how many times, like, and maybe there's a way to do this perfectly, right? And there's no ways to get, like, bonus health in weird ways, and it's always going to be fine. Maybe it's possible. And I'm just like, I don't know about that yet. But Demonic Embrace asks every quarter second, what's your max health? Okay, cool. Give me 2% of that as ability power. Great. Okay, that's pretty easy. Every quarter second it's gonna update that. It's not very expensive. It's pretty chill. That's probably like the right cadence in most cases. there are other times it's gonna be like, okay, hey, I'm casting Thresh Q. Okay, well, I cast Thresh Q. So, quick, my script is going to say, what's my character level? What's my ability rank? What's my ability power? What's my base damage? Do the math. Okay, great. Save this as a variable. This is my outgoing damage variable. And then I'm going to hit a target. And it's going to be like, okay, go apply outgoing damage based on this variable to the target. And that's going to be like what the script literally says. Now, it could be that instead we code Thresh Q missile.lua to, it's like in flight, whatever. And it's like, okay, on target hit before I deal damage, ask my level, ask my base damage, ask my other stuff, and then go deal it. And that might be efficient, might be not. Like, I imagine, for example, like Fiddlesticks' Crow Storm, maybe it shouldn't ask every single time it deals damage what your ability level is, because that's a lot of work. Maybe it should just ask when I cast the spell to store my damage as a variable, and whatever number it is, right? That might be like better scripting, even though theoretically you might want to like start casting Crow. Oh, I hit level 11, let's pick it up. Like, that's gonna be how it's coded. But I would defend that's probably correct to just store the variable once and then like, go on from there. I don't know, right? Maybe that does weird things with Staff of Flowing Water. I don't know if that's going to force up the stats with ability power quickly or not. I would have to investigate and figure out if it's a bug or not with Staff of Flowing Water. I don't really know. If I level up and I get more health, the Demonic Embrace increases my ability power. Is that going to change the damage of Crowthrower? I don't know. I can tell you right now. But like, maybe you have to do it that way. But yeah, it's going to be functionally like, teaching rocks to think, aka coding, and how that interacts is going to do weird stuff.
Interesting. On the end of so you mentioned that you have the group of you that push out the patch notes. In terms of the other teams, is there like a game systems team? Is there like I can imagine that they always come to you guys with new things, and then the balancing comes second, or how does everything work in unison when new big changes, like for example the Aurelion Soul that just got shipped? How does that work?
Right. So my understanding, in general, so the way, and Riot reorganizes itself once in a while, every few years, but there is the whole gameplay initiative, right? And so there's a game designer who's the lead of the gameplay initiative, who's technically my boss right now, who we just put out gameplay thoughts. So Riot Axes is a I think he's super smart, by the way. I think that guy's great. But he's like the game designer. He's the game design lead of the gameplay initiative. So gameplay oversees Champions team, it oversees the Summoner's Rift team, it oversees the modes team, it oversees the Game Loop team. Game Loop is things like matchmaking, right, stuff like that.
Yes.
So like, we're all sort of equals essentially, but like we all do our own things, of course, right? Now it can be interesting because these can interact with one another in really weird ways. So the durability update, from what I recall, the durability update made players think that matchmaking was better. Because if you don't die as fast, you have more room for skill expression, right? Because you don't get one shot by like any idiot pressing Talon and R flashing onto you or whatever the combo actually is. And so suddenly, if you're good at the game feels more fair, and matchmaking feels better because skill was a bigger determinant in who won the game. They didn't change anything on the Game Loop team for matchmaking, but 12.10 made champions more durable, and players were like, "Yep, matchmaking got better. The game feels more fair." Like you're giving me better teammates and opponents when this feels appropriate. It's like, okay. So you get like weird interactions like that. Where yeah. I mean, I don't know how to talk about specific interactions. I know that like I don't like so if we ship out live balance changes, right? We email the generic League of Legends design distro with like, hey, by the way, I'm buffing Thresh. Hey, by the way, I'm nerfing Samira. And so if the modes team wants to like, this might make Akali overpowered or Samira underpowered or whatever, they can like, if they want to do compensation nerfs on their side, they can. They have the ability to do so. Although, again, don't work on the team. I don't know, how they're going to iterate on that. I don't know what they're trying to do there. Certainly, we have plenty of oversight into what the champions are coming out. There is like embedded across all these teams is the gameplay analysis team. It's a bunch of really skilled players. I think most of them are ex-challenger or current challenger. Okay. So like there's a guy who played for UCLA on a collegiate team. They're very good players, right? I think half of them are currently masters early in the season, whatever. Anyway, moving on. And it's like, okay, they're embedded across these teams for like giving really good feedback on like how strong things are going to be. So for example, it's their job more than anyone else's. When I did like the AD carry update in 13.1b, was like, here's how much power they is going to give AD carry mathematically, and they were like pretty accurate. Where it like AD carry went from being like 20% of the power of a team to 21% of the power of the team, and it was like pretty much what their shot call was. And if I'm putting together a big change list, so I'm like, I want to make Rumble, gain 3% win rate in top lane and 4% win rate in jungle and gain nothing in mid lane. They're better players than I am, and will ever be. And they're going to be like, oh, we think this is going to be 2% in top lane, and it's actually going to be 1% in mid lane. It's actually going to buff mid lane, and it's right on in the jungle or whatever. And like, okay, we can move on from there. And everyone's human, so that can be correct. Neither am I, but like they're also there as basically like, okay, make sure severities are correct. So when we're playtesting Aurelion Soul, it's like there's a challenger Cassiopeia one trick turned game designer who's the guy who's doing who did the Aurelion Soul rework, for example. I think pretty sure about that one. Anyway, either way, even if I'm wrong, it's like, oh yeah, he knows really, really well, knows Aurelion Soul really well, and like either way, there's still a playtester on the project to like ensure balance levels are relatively appropriate, whatnot. So this is all to say that like, yeah, there's some level of interaction. I don't know exactly how many are like formalized necessarily. Like I haven't been attached to any new champions yet, for example, but my understanding, and maybe this is flawed, is like there's always someone on Summoner's Rift team attached to like a champion project to like just because we're doing a mage item update and this is going to like really matter here. Oh, it's going to interact with like Aurelion Soul's launch. Oh, hey, by the way, right? Like that could be really, really relevant. So having some level of interaction there is like pretty valuable.
Okay, very interesting. I'm curious in regards to in like the game system team. Is there like a definition? Like for example, League of Legends, of course, the esports portion of it is very important, and how digestible the gameplay is, and how it's viewed as a sport, so to say, is very important. Is there kind of some metrics that are followed in terms of how fun a game is to watch? Is that something that is defined?
I don't know if we have. So we have some metrics for it. I don't know if you can really metric fun. But in terms of, like we can get metrics on, average first blood or kills per game in pro play or game time and whatnot, and how much action there is. And certainly when the durability update hit, for example, kills per game in both solo queue and pro play went down a whole bunch. And a lot of that was we had also compensation buffed turrets a whole lot. Like turrets got buffed by more than the durability update buff champions, if I recall correctly. And that like really, really crushed action. And so if I recall correctly, this is from the outside looking in, I was a shoutcaster then. Like they nerfed turrets down some. I think they're maybe still stronger than pre-durability update. But they also increased the value of First Herald. They give it a bunch of flat gold. And they increased a bunch of the elemental drakes by either 50 or 100%. And then also made them more durable so that you'd be more likely to contest at the drakes. And Drake 1 and 2 were 40% more durable, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 were 60% more durable. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, Herald and Drake are more worth contesting. Maybe there are still fewer turret dives in pro play, but there is more action. And, there's some data collection of like, okay, when are first bloods happening? How many kills are there in a game or whatever? But also like, I watched the games and yeah, it seems like, this feels pretty good again. It doesn't seem like it's too boring. People aren't playing it too slowly. But that's always going to be something where it's like, we know pro play is less bloody than solo queue. And it's like, maybe solo queue should have slightly fewer kills. Maybe it's a little bit too, maybe, I'm not saying it's actually true, but like, hey, maybe solo queue is a bit too bloody. But maybe pro play is a little bit too slow. And like, I think we've all seen this LCK, like 8 total kills game 2 games,
yes.
Like they're definitely out there, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's an interesting design problem. How can you make the game less bloody in uncoordinated play and bloodier in coordinated play? Good luck. Maybe it's just like, yep, we keep buffing Dragon and Baron. I don't know. Maybe it's Scuttle Crab gives 500 gold and teams are going to fight for Scuttles. I'm not saying it's a good change, right? I'm not. But like, bet your ass suddenly mid laner's showing up and there's going to be a fight because it's about as valuable as Dragon used to be in 2013. I think it was 1K, but relatively that's kind of the value. So who knows, right? But that's the kind of stuff that like, and those are like the really difficult and sometimes more compelling problems of how can you change the game in a really grand way.
Yeah, it crossed my mind, like the durability patch change. I anecdotally loved it, because I think the standoff, the standoff on around Drake, I think made things a lot more interesting. Everything became a lot more teamfight centric, and I think that has been like the general direction everything has been heading in ever since I guess, 2020 when Damon won the World Championship. And in my mind, is there ever a concern if the game becomes more and more figured out? Because I feel like the system changes haven't been as drastic as they were in the past when, for example, plants came into the picture and all of a sudden the game changed completely. Is that ever a concern, or is that like, are we going towards that ideal where team fighting and standoffs around objectives is what the game should be at the highest level?
It's tough to call, and I'm certainly not the game director of League, so even if I have an opinion, it doesn't matter because there's it's like 3 levels above me at least to make that call. But in general, my feel is I think it's good if the game doesn't feel solved. I think that's a positive thing. So there's a couple things going on here. So one, I think players, it feels like, it's kind of anecdotal, but like I feel like players get pretty offended if pushing is actually good. So I think players are pretty against like Lethality Scion being good, against Hullbreaker being good, against Tryndamere, because like we're playing this game 4-on-4 or 5-on-4 or whatever, and then oh no, Trynd versus Akali in top lane determined who won the game, and the other events like don't matter. Yes. And at the same time, top laners are like, I have my honorable duel of Riven versus Fiora in top lane. It's a really cool lane, and then Zach just tells me who wins because he showed up. Okay, it's not an honorable duel. And or we have our honorable duel, but it doesn't matter because Draven's 7-0. And it like I don't know how you balance these well. And I know in the old days top laners could TP down, but I don't think top laners, again on whole, there are Shen players out there, don't get me wrong. They like their honorable duel, but it's like, oh no, but the real gameplay is my Malphite TP'd bot lane at 8 minutes and double so he won the game. I got a turret plate. It's like, well, okay, I'm not allowed to play summoner spells for my lane. I have to take my summoner spell to teleport bot lane. That's still what the game is about, right? So it's like, that's tough. I don't know the solve. I don't know what should be done about it, but it's like top laners, again, in broad strokes, have this like honorable duel 1v1 that junglers mess up, but also the game because everyone else is offended that this 1v1 with Fiora decided who won the game. I would say that top lane's impact of the game is actually like mathematically relatively fair. I think it's actually about the right level. I don't know if the things they're doing are exactly appropriate. Like I know in pro play, Rift Herald is actually about the supports roaming up, and it's a 4v4, and sometimes AD carries arrive. That was part of why Rift Herald even got made in the first place. It was a top lane objective. It was top lane felt isolated. It was first to do nothing. And it's like, well, here's Rift Herald. It's gonna spawn 8 minutes into the game. You're gonna have your ultimate. Don't worry about it, and it's gonna be valuable. And so top laners have an objective on their side of the map. And then we added a second herald. There didn't used to be 2 heralds. So then the second herald existed, and it's like, oh, there's more to do on that side of the map. You can play for stuff. Some of the weird interact with that is, well, now it means that herald gets summoned and just ends top lane because the turret died. And now the lane is over, and Fiora was given 500 gold for first turret. And it's like, now Riven can't win the 1v1 anymore. And it's like, because Leona roamed up for first Drake. And it's like, wait, what happened to my 1v1? 3 people decided my lane was over. That's tough, right? It's so tough. Because it's like, do you have an objective? No, it's Leona's objective. So that's tough, right? I still think Herald's a good thing for the game, right? It's creating action. It is a thing that top laners get to fight over, and top prio is a really big deal. I think especially in solo queue, because at least in like solo queue, where it's like, I'm playing it around like a D4 MMR right now, and it's like I've seen one support roam up the first Herald. Like total, it's definitely. Do we have top prio? Okay, cool. Someone, Master's gonna go solo because we're not gonna push or something. So anyway, again, this goes for a lot. I don't even remember the original question anymore, but
that's fine.
Systems are really complicated and interactive.
No, for sure. It's like I'm always like, even when you mentioned the 500 gold crab situation, like my imagination just instantly disappeared in a world where that happens. I really like when drastic changes happen and the game is kind of born anew. I'm a big fan of that, and I feel like the last couple of years has been very limited. It's like, for example, this year the Chemtech Drake came back, and in my mind I'm feeling that's just the dragon that was promised last year already, and then it's re-altered, and I'm hoping, I'm the type of person that's hoping for a lot of drastic changes just so the game feels always fresh. And I feel, at least in the recent years, the freshness has come from champion diversity more so than anything else. And
I feel you on that. Yeah, for me as a player, I get really excited when Elemental Drakes first came out. I remember like playing normal games with friends and was like, no, we're not going to end the game yet. We're on 3 Drakes. One more for Infernal Soul. I want to play with Infernal Soul. That's cool.
Yes,
and it's like, oh, whoa, Elder Dragon's going to come in. I can't wait. That's going to be interesting, And all the new items and whatnot with mythics and everything else. Like, yeah. So I, as a player, super engaged player, has been playing the game for 13.5 years. I really like when there's huge system shakeups. I don't know if every player feels that way. Like, you're also obviously really hardcore. You've been playing. Yes. I mean, you were even playing as a competitor in 2012, right? Like, you're obviously really invested. I would bet most League players actively haven't been playing for 10 years. But that said, maybe it is still correct for the change. Again, I haven't looked into it. I don't really know what the overall player base thinks. I know the Reddit user base, like people who are going to watch this video are really hardcore, right? Like,
yes.
Like your viewer base is not the average League of Legends player.
Yes.
But like, there's a lot of league players out there who are incredibly important, who aren't podcast watchers and aren't, necessarily big into esports, whatever. So you have to design for everyone, of course. Again, for me, I would like there to be more shakeups. Yeah, I hope 2024 feels like, what was it, like 2019, whatever had elemental drakes on it. Like that would be cool for me. I would like something, pretty large to that level. Something like, Rift Herald being added to the game. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think makes me rethink about the game and makes it really fun because it's going to be a different game. Like even though it's still 90% League of Legends on Summoner's Rift, like that 10% I think to me is really valuable.
For sure. No, I'm with you 100%. And I didn't think about it this way, that often it's very easy to just like Reddit and Twitter and think that this is the reality of what the game is. Yeah. But most people don't engage with these mediums, and that kind of makes sense in terms of what the player base is, for sure. I wanted to ask you, this might be a strange question, so I'm just, everything that comes to my mind, I'm just going to fire at you. Is there a way to measure what is frustrating to play against?
Yes, actually. So there's an imperfect one, which I'll just start with, which you can just use ban rate. And ban rate's not ideal. You can use like, a bit more in-depth analytics like ban rate, but like indexing for pick rate. So, a champion like Tahm Kench is not popular, and Yone is, right? And so it's like, okay, well, if we compare Yone's ban rate, it's going to usually be higher than Tahm Kench's. Unless, and if that's close, it's like, wow, people are really frustrated with Tahm Kench then, if he's not even in most games, but still has a really high ban rate, right? That like, even though you don't expect to see him, because that's going to be tightly correlated, right? So like, Morgana has a pretty high ban rate and whatnot, and that's not always frustration, right? That could be just, it counters my champion. So like, Morgana is the most obvious anti-tank champion in support, right? So Morgana has a really high ban rate, especially in low elo, because if you're going to play Taric or Nautilus or Leona or Blitzcrank, and Blitzcrank's really popular, by the way, well, in solo queue, players will pick Morgana against you. In pro play, they don't, and maybe for right, maybe for wrong, whatever. But like, you can also like survey players, survey like player survey data. This actually got posted about really recently, where if you ask players on like, hey, this champ is 1 to 5 frustrating, champs like Zyra score much higher than champs like Morgana. Zyra has a higher win rate and a lower ban rate than Morgana, and scores higher in frustration. When you ask players specifically what champion is frustrating to you, right? And so that's what's nice is you can actually do direct survey data, and that's really valuable. Actually, I think survey data is really valuable, so that can help a ton. But yeah, at the very least, you still have. I'm just personally a really big fan of statistical movement over time. So looking at like Syndra's ban rate just go up and to the right. It's like, okay, or Samira's ban rate go up to the right. It's like, okay, players are increasingly in the belief that Samira is the most necessary ban right now in League of Legends. Okay, like that we should consider acting on that.
That makes
even if it's for a staleness argument, where it's like if players feel like they have to ban this champion, freeing out that ban would be nice.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm curious about like what besides champions being very weak and very strong, what other things need to be balanced to make the game more enjoyable? Frustration was one thing, and it was interesting to hear you speak about Samira specifically, because it's like I always queue support, and Samira has been my go-to ban because in my mind, I have a really hard time picking supports that are good into Samira. It's like I can play Alistar, but I'm going to wait until 13.3 until I'm going to be playing Alistar into Samira, because I don't want to be playing Alistar into Renato or something, because I was playing a lot of Ashe, and then I just see her eating my ult, so I just started banning Samira.
Yep, I get you.
I'm totally definitely there. In my small anecdotal experience, I can connect it to what you're saying. Is there any other metrics besides, so I mentioned frustration, good, overpowered. Is there anything else? Like you mentioned the word stale. Like,
oh sure.
In order to mix things up, like how do you notice these trends, and how does that really work?
Right. So there's a few things going on here. So one, we're actually right now in the process. One of the game designers is on it, on the Summoners team, about like redoing, or at least investigating what kind of sort of automated metrics we want to use, like as like primary focal points for, some level of data-driven balance. So if you know, we've posted the balance framework before, where it's like, okay, if you cross any of these ban rate or pick rate or win rate or ban rate thresholds, especially in really elite play, if you're really stale in pro play for a certain amount of time, and that kind of leads to playing Whack-A-Mole. And it's like, well, maybe actually we should just be looking at things like, and I'm making stuff up here. It's like, oh, if ban rate keeps scaling to the right, you know, that's going to make us look at it, whatever. I'm not sure. So, but I'll move on to a little bit from here and say that I think all these are going to be kind of just sort of self-driven of things that are that you're going to consider valuable. So some champions are like, their purpose for existing is that they're hard to play. So Aphelios is the big brain AD carry. And so he's going to have a resting win rate of like 47%, probably at like highest, maybe 48. But as long as Aphelios players understand, like, yeah, he's hard to play, most players are bad at Aphelios, and they can understand that they're not the average Aphelios. He's actually good in their hands, just not in everyone else's hands. Then that's fine. And like his win rate's low doesn't matter, because if you're good at the champion, you'll be successful. And trusting that players can understand that themselves is pretty valuable. So like, it's okay if his win rate's low, because we know he's actually good in the hands of experts. I have seen a report of like, you know, what's a champion's win rate of games where you have 200,000 mastery on it, right? Where it's like, we can get a champion where that's the win rate, you know, what's the average win rate that we're seeing right now on the live gameplay servers, and then what's the win rate in the hands of you know, people who are like at least close to mains. They have 100 or so games in the champion, and it's like, oh, okay, everyone but Zeri in the middle of like last October was over 50%. If you were good at champion, it was you were going to climb if you're playing your main. So it's like, and Zeri was like at 42% back then, right? Like she was really dumpstered, you know, at that time of that report.
Yes.
I don't know where she's at now. I'm sure she's fine. But like even Aphelios was like, actually in the hands of Aphelios mains, he's fine. So it's like, okay, cool. So he's like not a pressing concern, but you know, maybe his mastered win rate should be equal to Miss Fortune's mastered win rate. Obviously her first time win rate's much higher than Aphelios's. But it's like, okay, that's one way to look at it. I really like, for example, if skill order makes sense. So to me, and this is actually part of the Thresh buffs I just shipped, put into the game on Friday night, so you'll see whenever that ships, probably Monday. Like most players, when they think of Thresh, like, yeah, the Lantern's cool, but it's like, he's not the shielding support. He's the cool hook, make cool plays APM support, right? Like, he's really flashy. And most players max Q than E than W. His highest win rate is every other order but that. And to be fair, new Thresh players will do the default skill order. Like there's some biases there in the data, but like still though, most players when they think of Thresh, they think of throwing out hooks, and maxing hook is currently wrong. Maxing shield is his best skill order. If you look at his top 4 skill orders, or sorry, because there's 6 permutations, right, of what you max first, second, and third.
Yes.
The top 4 all have W first or second. His 2 lowest win rates are maxing W last, and it's like, that's not why people pick. I mean, like, Lantern is why people play Thresh. Like, it's a really cool ability, but like, its rank up is more shielding, basically. It's we can give you a good amount of W casts. Like, we can put that cooldown at a decent spot, and the shield scales aggressively with soul count anyway. So, like, that can be a 1.1 on your wonder, and just like let putting points in the hook be correct, and let you be the cool hook guy, because he is the cool hook guy, right? And it's like, yeah, you know, Thresh is meant to be a little bit squishy, because he has so much playmaking, and he chooses when to go in, he chooses when to go out. He slows them, he flays, he lanterns in friends. Like, it's meant to be high tension. That's the entire fantasy of that character. Like, he shouldn't have Nautilus levels of durability. He shouldn't have Leona levels of durability. His shield shouldn't probably be 500 points, you know, late game. So let's, you know, move those things around. So my changes are like, I'm buffing Q rank up by a ton. I'm buffing E rank up by a little bit. I'm nerfing W rank up. The goal is still to be win rate positive, because he is like 48% for average players, which is maybe okay. Again, he's a high skill champion. But like, he has a pretty significant like skew by MMR, and it's like, and the elite players just maxing shield. And it's like that's a really boring way for Thresh to be good. So you know, I'm deciding that I want to pick up Thresh as I want to flatten his skill point. Like, at least flatten it, if not make Q max the best, because I think it's the coolest version of the character.
Mm.
And so that kind of stuff was out there. When I buffed Rakan in 13.3, it was again a skill order thing where it's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if maxing Q was as viable as maxing E? And I got some pushback there because Q is arguably a less interesting skill, right? Simple line skill shot, hit one person, is probably less cool than, shielding multiple teammates and dancing around and back and forth. So maybe it shouldn't be as good. Maybe it should be 1 point wonder. It's like, okay, well then the flat healing per character level is what got better. I didn't buff Q damage rank up. So you probably still don't max Q first. Maybe it's okay that he's always going to go W and E. This is the champion. And so there's some conversations there, right? Like, I don't think, shield max should be good on Rumble. At least not first. Like, maybe Q and E should have some choice. I don't know. But so, like, coming up with my own design goals of what should be valuable. Alistar got a bunch of AP ratio buffs because I think it should at least be a choice to like pick up stat shards on him, and for Relic Shield to feel good to get it transformed, for Baron buff to feel good. We're nowhere close to like top or mid Alistar being strong. Like, we're nowhere close to AP Alistar being a good build, but like, if buffing AP ratios makes Shurelya's like competitive with Locket, that's probably a good thing. If picking the AP stat shard is competitive with picking the CDR one or the armor one, that's probably a good thing because it's some more choice. And I'm not really trying to make Wizard Cow good, but if you have a little bit of choice in runes, and like I noticed that in 13.3, like the pick rate on the AP stat shard like doubled from like 3% to 6%. So people are trying it. And like I think that's just, it's a really, really minor thing, but like I think it's a positive, and it's maybe not the most pressing thing, but for the work required, which is changing a number in the back end by 0.2, I think it's decent.
Okay, I see. Is it common that most, like, I would imagine that in the lower ranks that everyone just maxes Q regardless of the champion that they play. I imagine that's like the trend. But also I'm thinking about it, and I imagine that most champions, it's correct to max Q at the same time. It just feels very natural. that's
a bit
design.
of a design goal. Yeah, it is actually. It's a bit of a design goal where, like, usually the like standard, repeatable, this is kind of what a champion does, is very frequently on Q. This isn't always true. Like, Rel is, like, I think her W is kind of her most iconic ability. I think in general that tends to be where we kind of move. I mean, Ezreal is really obvious example. Samir is really obvious example. Thresh,
yes.
Theoretically, right? Like Blitzcrank. A lot of these champions, their iconic abilities on Q, and then you have like the natural inclination of going that way. So yeah, that is so by design. Like, there's sort of a internal feel for what the buttons do. W is often the most weird one. Just like for what it's worth, like, you think about it. And it's not always true, but it often is the most weird one. It's where a lot of champions' passives are, like Vayne W, for example. But yeah, like, we also have the recommended skill order stuff that got added in the preseason as well. There's a lot of like little accessibility stuff. Like, here's what people typically do as a jungle path. Here's what people typically skill up. We had recommended items for the last little while that was data driven as of a couple years ago, but was hand done years before then. And just helping players get into the game. And it's like, yep, you should kind of skill these up. Here's your sort of your default experience. There's value in that for sure.
No, I really like the way, even though I don't use it, I really like the way like League of Legends has implemented it, because I played Dota 2 a little bit in the off season, and the way they did it is like you have to like press the guide, and then there's like just a bunch of random text, and then it was very, very overwhelming because I didn't play enough Dota 2 to like digest everything at the same time. I'm lucky because I played I played Dota in the Warcraft 3 client, so I knew what was up with all of the items, with Blacking Bottle and so forth. But it was just like, here is a bunch of information from this player that made a guide in the game, and just follow along. And then there's like 10, 15 options, like this you buy when this is going on. And it didn't really like connect with what's going on in the game. And I feel like League of Legends has done a good job of this, even though I almost never use it. But I can see, the usability when I play like with friends that come back after playing like League maybe 3 years ago. They come back and just play a game of Cho'Gath, and they just buy whatever's there.
I just played an ARAM last night with some friends and acquaintances, and like one of them was like, how do I get double cast on Udyr? And it's like, it's a 1 minute cooldown. It's your ultimate. You just press it again when it's available. And someone else hadn't played whatever another recently changed champion was. Aurelion Sol. Like, we were playing. It was the day of the Aurelion Sol update. It was actually on Thursday, and he's like, what's this laser thing? It's like, he has laser now. I was like, wait, since when? Oh, today. Oh, okay. Just like didn't know, right? Just like logged into play. So yeah, I mean, that definitely happens some.
That's cool. I wanted to ask. Is there any champions that are like statistical anomalies? It's like, is there a champion where you just don't have enough information to define what's going on with it? Or does every champion have like their niche player base and you can kind of put each champion in a box and say, this is for pro play, this is for one tricks and so forth?
I think there's interesting discussion there. So I don't know if champions necessarily need to be in boxes. Certainly, I think there's some value in some level categorization. You know, I think in general it's good if ranged champions are squishy and melee champions are tanky, unless there's a reason not to. Like Urgot is ranged, but he's kind of a juggernaut, so you know he doesn't have to have like Jace levels of durability. Even if his base health might be the same, he's got a shield, right? It's really obvious that Urgot's gonna be tankier. Even though they're both ranged or whatever, right? Rakan probably should be squishier than Urgot because Rakan's more mobile, even though they have like the exact same attack range practically. And they both literally have, I go into melee and touch you, and that does my job for me, right? Like those are still different skills and different champions. So you always want to, individual always trumps general, right? Specific beats general. But on average, yeah, it probably should be true that ranged champions are squishy, melee champions are tanky. I personally think it's okay if there are some champions that are just made for newer players. That like Garen is a bit of a League of Legends on-ramp. He has free passive health regen. He's not mana bound. He has no skill shots. He has a time he has W, which is kind of cool. But like, his abilities are pretty straightforward. He's pretty easy to play. His W passively stacks on last hitting to like teach you that last hitting is good, in case you didn't realize from gold being valuable. I think there's a lot that Garen does well at being an intro champion, and that's fine. And I don't think we need Garen to be a meta top lane pick. Now he happens to be good into Cassante, and that's fine. He has some counter picks. I think he's actually supposed to be good into Aurelia as well. Just a lot of his kit works out well against what she does. Turns out silencing someone who blinks 7 times a second is really valuable. And Merc turns against full AD kind of sucks, so you don't want Merc turns against Garen. And it's like, yeah, he just has some good matchups in the pro play, and like that's okay if he's there. But I think we would think something is wrong if Garen was like a 50% presence pro champion. It's like what's going on that League wants this like kind of brain dead regen bot as a champion. Like Set was also meant to be an easy early to play champion, right? He also has a bunch of free regen. He's also resourceless. He's also melee low skill shot. Like he was meant to be an easy to play champion, and I mean that's true. His skill curve is rather flat.
Interesting.
They also had like a really aggressive set meta for a while, and it's like, this is maybe not what we wanted. And I'm not sure. I wasn't on the team when that was happening, right? But like, there is some understanding of this, right? Where Yumi's kind of in this boat as well, right? Where she's actually one of the most successful champions for brand new League players, where like they're actually just starting out and they're playing the first 10 games, and Yumi is a top 1%. Of like, yeah, she's really, really good for new League players because it doesn't ask you to learn positioning. It doesn't ask you to learn dodging skill shots because League is a really hard game as it is. It's okay, hitch a ride, hang out. I imagine Garen's up there as well, and I imagine Akali is not. And that's fine. Akali doesn't have to be good for new players. Akali is exciting and high skill, and get good is I think a reasonable thing to say for difficult to play champions. And that can be really weird if you consider yourself an Akali player and she's at 45% win rate, and we just say, no, trust me, if you're good at her, it's fine. But then you have the opposite where people just say their mains are nerfed for pro, and it's like, no, actually Rise is hard to play. If you're good at Rise, you'll be rewarded, but most people are bad at Rise. Like that's just how it is. And so it's not even always just like nerfed for pro. It's like, no, it's nerfed for people who are good at the champion, and you just have to get there yourself. And that can be hard as well, where it's like, why bother learning a champion if it's gonna be bad until I can play 100 games on it? Like there's a weird ask there. Like that's a tough question. It's a tough topic to get through, but that's anyway, not everything needs neat boxes. Again, there are some champs that I think are just naturally going to be pretty good in pro play. I also think, to kind of expand on this somewhat, I talked about this earlier with like Whackamole and like banning whatever's like high pick rate or ban rate or win rate or whatever. But I think like not all pro meta games are created equal, and not all solo queue metas are created equal. Where like right now, solo queue meta is actually pretty reasonable. Like there actually aren't even a really high elo like that many marksman picks. I know I looked a couple days ago, and like Masters Plus was like, okay, it's a lot of Karma Lulu, and it is really enchanter heavy, but like it's not. Outside of Ashe, it's like, okay, it's Ashe with the other enchanters, but like there's not a lot of Jhin and Caitlyn Callista. There is in pro, but like if pro has like 15 rotating champions, it's actually kind of cool. Now I would like a Nautilus and Leona to be a bit more of that rotation. But like it's actually a pretty high variety pro meta. So like I don't necessarily hate that marksman supports exist. Halo Blaze is used by like Pyke and the marksman supports. That's kind of it. But like maybe that's okay. And like seeing the occasional Ashe and Caitlyn and Vera support is like probably right. Now maybe Ashe's overpowered. Okay, maybe Karma's overpowered. Maybe Lulu's overpowered. Thankfully Genji lost to Yumi last night, so we're safe still. That was wild. I saw that champ like I'm like, please tell me they lose, and they did. And I was okay. But I was about to have a heart attack. He's like, we can't do this again. Like, there's no way. Come on. But and we see like a little bit of Nautilus. We see a little bit of Leon and Alistar. I would like it to be a little bit higher. Like I would like to be as many tanks as there are marksmen. And so I think like we're really close to a super super good like support meta in pro play. Like you give me like 20% more presence on tanks like as an overall class, and we're in there. Like I'm just gonna AFK this. We're just gonna ride this pro meta for like the rest of the year, because that's really good. Now I think AD carry is a little bit tight. I think there could be some opening there. I'm not giving it a ton of thought, but I think it's a little bit shallow. But with like a couple of very light moves, I think the support meta is actually really good. So it's like actually, I don't want to right now. That's why I buffed 6 champions and said, hopefully that's enough. You'll find one or two that you like that you think is going to fit the meta, and we'll just kind of let you do that. So that's kind of the hope with what those changes were. We'll see. But that and then the solo queue, at least for like not ultra high elo, is like 2-to-1 range to melee, which is like fine. Like, you can play a lot of stuff down there and a lot of stuff successful. Like Rel high win rate, Alistar, okay, nerfed him, but he was doing fine. Rakan's high win rate, Leona's high win rate in the hands of most players. Nautilus was pretty high win rate for like elite play, Masters Plus. So there was stuff floating around out there, and like solo queue meta is actually pretty happy. We're kind of Pro is close, and then there's other stuff we can look at down the line. But it's okay if there's like a decent holding pattern of rock paper scissors going on.
Yes. No, I'm watching like the pro games on 13.1.b, and I'm always hoping that Ashe, Lucian, Kate is out, because then all of a sudden everything is like opened up. It's like everything can be played, and today we had I believe like Xayah Nautilus into Karma Sivir, which was like refreshing. That was like the Nautilus came in, and I'm just hoping that the Ashe nerf comes in and the Kate nerf comes in, maybe another Lucian Nami one, and then all of a sudden the meta is wide open again. But I think the Draven players would be very happy in such a world.
Yeah, but then if we go back to like 100%, presence, and it's just Draven every game, like, and then it's just Draven Caitlyn, because Caitlyn can handle Draven, I guess, or whatever else can survive like a really aggressive bully lane. Maybe you need to play Ezreal. It's like, okay, well, right, you can very quickly overcorrect and get into a much narrower, and it's like, oh, it's cool, we're seeing Draven now, but it's like, is League better at 100% presence Draven, 100% presence Ezreal, or is it better with its like, is 80% Lucian, 30% Sivir, 30% Zeri, like, is that just better? So like I don't want to overcorrect to like pretending the grass is greener everywhere. And maybe I'm wrong, and like there is like a really vast open field just waiting for us right behind that Lulu ban. But I'm unsure, right? Because I do think we're really close to it being really, really varied. With just like, right, if Nautilus is 50% presence, I think the support meta looks really good. Is kind of like my view on it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think already the fact that I always look at it through the lens of the teams, and G2 was a very Nautilus heavy team. And that would be great,
right? And wouldn't that be cool if like every G2 game is Nautilus, Leona, and Pyke, and then every like Fnatic game when we see him in April is, we're gonna have Lulu and Karma, and like wouldn't that, like, I would like that, right? Where it's like actually Zeri is as viable as Lucian, is as viable as Sivir, is as viable as Ashe AD carry, and just turns out 2 teams per league play different styles. I think that's way better. I don't know if you're watching much of LCS last split, but like CLG played a ton of like Yone, Sylas, Akali flex, and it's like they're the one Yone team. It's like, great, Yone is strong enough that some teams just play Yone. Perfect. That's exactly what we want, right? Like that's to me the ideal balance, is where like you have a million 20% presence champion.
So basically the hope would be that this idea of identity, the players have in solo queue by playing their own specific champ, that stretches all the way to pro play, that
that'd be great.
Teams have identities and more of the field is open. Yeah, that would be fantastic, honestly.
we have like what, like 5-10% presence on Kindred right now. Like that's like the healthiest marksman junglers have been in a really long time, where like there's a once in a while Graves, but Kindred's actually like there for a few teams. Like, right, because it's been like 100% Graves or none, right? But we have some Kindred, and that's like really good. Now I know it's like really like Vi Sejuani Wukong, like jungle is pretty flat. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying jungle's in a super great spot, but like there it feels like there's like a little bit of spice out there, and so I think there's a lot. It's really close.
For sure. I think there's also like a level of almost. I know this from experience that players are very hesitant to try new things that can be very good. Like we see some Amumu games. I think Udyr, I was very surprised that it wasn't played in pro play at all with the rework of it. I was very happy to see Amumu. I think Amumu was very strong. And we saw Trundle picked a couple of times, and I thought Trundle benefited from the fact that the golems and raptors are a lot more killable. I think there's a lot more room to explore, and I hope that people become more and more open-minded as things continue.
Of course, and that's tough as well, right? Because we can react really quickly to solo queue, at least win rates. So it's like, okay, we nerfed Caston, and you can watch his ban rate trickle down by day. As like some players read the patch notes and some didn't. So like his ban rate will keep doing this every single day until players realize like, no, he's actually balanced again. It's fine. You don't have to ban him anymore. It's okay. And his pick rate will probably drop as well as people realize he's not OP and they can play whatever they want to play. And if they still want to play Caston, he's actually still not a weak champion, right? He's just balanced. He's not must pick, must ban anymore, right? So pretty happy with those nerfs. But it's like, okay, we can react to solo queue, win rates instantly, pick rates and ban rates trail. And then 2.5 weeks later, or a week and a half later, Pro Play gets the patch, and Pro Play win rates are useless.
Yes.
And Pro Play pick rate is, well, we're actually only measuring 10 mid laners per league. So it's like, what if Jensen still really likes Azir, and in a world where like Dig is good, everyone just follows what Jensen's doing, or like if Chovy still likes Silas, and everyone's like, we're just gonna do what Chovy does. Right, like someone in a world where people are going to follow the best players. I don't know why I picked Ignitas on my start. I know they're 0-6. I could have picked anyone else, and I chose Ignitas. It was a bit of an L. But yeah, like in a world where like, no, I want to follow what Gen G is doing, or I want to follow what Ruler's doing, or I want to follow what Carry is doing, or I want to follow what Barrel's doing, or I want to follow what Chovy's doing, or I want to follow what YSKM is doing. It's like, okay, well, now you're just measuring one person's view of the patch. Then is that good? Like, and so we're delayed in reactive pro play because it's like, well, we think we actually buffed Nautilus enough in 13.3. And then we're going to watch games on 13.3, and LCS and LDC are going to start, and then we're going to get LCK the week later. And it's like, if they haven't picked Nautilus, are they right to have not picked Nautilus? Or have they just not practiced enough yet? Or do they not think it's enough? Or are they waiting for Barrel to pick it so they're going to do it? Right? Like, which of these is true? And we know it's going to be like April by the time we know, right? It's like, well, we're about to lock 13.4 in 2 days.
I must imagine as well that the additional layer of it is like the sample size is already very small, and then you have so many different levels of play too within pro play, because it's hard for me to claim that LPL is the same as the LCS in terms of level, and then the ERLs as well, and then that comparison must be also very tough to decipher.
Yeah. And I think there's some value in looking at like more aggregated data. Like, we're going to see what's happening in the NA Challenger Series. We're going to see what's happening in the ERLs and elsewhere. There's an NA a Challenger player who plays Garen, and like it's good in Cassante. Yeah, right. And it's great, right? Because like that's super cool. He's phase rush, infinite move speed Garen, and it's like, okay, I'm not saying it's necessarily like a big pro pick, but like it is actually good in the matchup. And I mean, honestly, like we probably should see 10% Garen presence in pro play potentially, because he actually was at that lane really hard. But whatever. And just like I don't know. End of the day, it's people have to actually decide to put the practice into it, and that can be really tough.
Is this something that you've felt in the recent times? It's like perception of champion strength seems to, at least in my experience, it seems to like weigh in heavy. And is there something that is broken but very underutilized based off of what you've seen?
I mean, I do think so.
In general.
Yeah. So my pick'em for highest win rate champion in pro play. For Worlds rather was Neela. I thought Neela was actually a really good champion.
Oh, okay.
She's really good in enchanter metas, which we were in, because she gets free heal and shield power. If you haven't played Neela Soraka, that lane is very dumb, because you actually can't die. Also, it sounds funny because every heal over time tick from Soraka Q starts the Neela heal sound effect over again. So you're on a washing machine. It goes.
Okay.
It's great. Yeah, but like if Soraka lands a Q, you just both full heal. It's like it's wild how strong that is. And so like Neela's really good in Channa metas. Samira's really good in the tank metas because she wants CC follow up, and Neela gives free heal and shield power, right? In a world where we have a bunch of Gorge Rankers, Neela scales off of those. In a world where we're seeing some Dr. Mundo, it's not a ton of it, but you know, Mundo used to be good. Aatrox is around some. He self heals, right? Neela again scales off all those. Sylas is like the champion, right? So it's like there's a bunch of things that actually Neela is good with right now. She's relatively good in melee heavy, especially if it's low DPS, because she can drain tank with Ravenous Hydra Shield Bow BT. And so I actually feel like it's actually a really good Neela metagame, and we just kind of don't see it. So oh well. I think Twitch is also very, very good. I know when we had Spellthief's top a while back, and like Lorlo was playing top Janna, and we had a couple teams around the world would play like top Smite Karma, top Smite Janna. I think the low-key best champ there is actually Twitch, because Twitch just guarantees you win mid lane with Spellthieves, because he just ignores top lane, and whoever's playing mid, Akali or whatever, just doesn't get to play League, because Twitch might be there, and you lose and you have a mid laner. And I don't care if they're like, if someone ever takes Renekton, you're like, 5-tier plate Renekton versus no farm Akali, I take that every time, right? Like, of course, go have fun. Here's my counter pick. I'm not leaning against you. So like there was stuff that just like wasn't played, but right now Twitch AD carry I think is also very strong. He's not really good at early lane control. He's okay with like Doran's Ring start, Presence of Mind, like spam W, and it's okay. But he actually has like really high base health, so he actually is pretty good at level 1 scraps. It's like 680. It's like really really high. So he actually is and if you like want to go Halo Blades or even PTAs, like not too bad for early trades. He just gets outranged by Ashe, which is annoying. But like if you have any level of moderate aggression. Like Twitch is very, very good. He spiked early with the new item update because you rush play the ring a lot of time. You still got IE by third, which is like in enough time that you're useful in team fights.
Yes.
Or you can just go full on hit. You should like Wits or something if you want to like survive a Kali. Like I think he's really good. I think Twitch is really, really good. And also, yeah, I think they're really, really greedy metagames right now. So when we're seeing things like their support and whatnot, it's like that is supposed to be a world where you can just play like Pike Samira and he just dies, or like Pantheon Samira, which is like incredibly aggressive, but like if Jhin dies to Hex Flash, are you allowed to play Jhin anymore? Or do you just die to Hex Flash Pantheon W with like follow up, right? Like because she just win walls all your trade kills, and you know, like there's a certain point where it's like that's why I wondered about both Pantheon and Pike, where they weren't even. I mean, Pantheon's not great in solo queue outside of mid lane, but you know, I think there's just stuff out there where people are getting a little bit too greedy in some of their bot lane support picks, and I think there are counters out there, and so I mean that's part of why I just buffed a bunch of take supports was to have that kind of flow work. But I do think the metagame has gotten slightly too greedy, and given enough time would snap back on its own, but I wanted to give it that nudge.
No, for sure. I also felt like it was balancing on that edge, like something goes wrong and then you're useless. Like that's always been like a conversation around champs that are so greedy. I think that's the best way to put it. I think Samira is super interesting. I'm surprised we haven't seen it just yet, even though the sample size on 31.b is rather small. I thought the Infinity Edge changes was very good for her. And like considering a lot of these bot lanes that are harass heavy are very projectile heavy, and if something goes your way, everything shifts. Yep. I always use Nyla as my counter to Samira. I really like to play Nyla into Samira. So
she doesn't block anything. You just ult her out of her ult. Great.
that one is lovely for me. And Nyla, I feel like whenever she shows up, once again, very anecdotal experience, only my solo experience. I feel like the most frustrating variance of playing against Nyla is when I feel like the enemy support gaining levels is going to be detrimental. Like I think that aspect of Nyla has some abuse case, I feel, that is underutilized. For sure.
No, she's really, really good with champs who actually want levels. Yumi's one of her better pairings because turns out, I mean, one, you just keep Yumi safe forever, but like turns out she actually likes all of her rank ups and she likes getting levels.
Yes.
So yeah, like that's definitely out there. And Shadows weirdly actually do kind of like their levels quite a bit. So yeah, it is strong. Like it's a lot of her power budget for sure.
Also, I can imagine also that the new items must be very good for her. Like the box that I put it in with the changes that you made for the AD carry role, which I love, by the way. I think the changes were fantastic because I think there was a big problem with like the whole LDR purchase on second to prepare yourself for the IE. I think that was horrible for the game. And the conversations I had with my AD carry players about Collector and its weakness, just because they needed a filler item, this was always a pain stick. You know, it was a pain. I'm surprised. Sometimes I notice that in a lot of the conversations I have with other like analysts in the scene when I'm doing the costumes and so forth, I feel like people don't understand how powerful PD still is. Like,
that's very good.
I think that sometimes the idea of how powerful the second IE or the Navori quick plate is sometimes let's say overestimated. Is that something that has been that you've noticed in terms of the metrics that people are buying these items on second when they don't necessarily need to, or maybe it's fine enough that it's not that bad for the metrics?
It's tough because player like behavior data is prone for all kinds of biases. So I'm gonna start with actually a tangent and then go back to the topic at hand. So like 10 months ago, Jax was buying Divine Sunderer, and like 10% of Jaxes would buy Trinity Force. And Trinity Force is like a 4% higher win rate than Divine Sunderer.
Oh, wow.
And so we manually edited his rec items to recommend instead only Triforce. And the pick rate went from like 80-90% Divine Sunderer, 10% Trinity Force to like 60% Trinity Force, 40% Divine Sunderer.
Wow.
So, which meant like most players were just buying the rec item. But like literally all we did was change the rec item, and most players changed what they did.
That's crazy.
Which is wild, by the way, that many players just buy whatever's showing up to them on the shop. And of course, plenty of players just stay with Divine Sunder, right? They had their own idea what they wanted to buy, and they just bought it manually, and it's fine. Like, we're not saying they shouldn't do it. What's interesting, though, is the win rates became flat. So, between the items. So what's interesting is like, okay, well, most players autopiloted Divine Sunderer, and some players chose Triforce. And players who made a conscious choice tend to be better Jax players. When we swapped, most players autopiloted Triforce, but those who made the choice to go Divine Sunderer were no longer on average outperforming Triforce users who were autopiloting. So Triforce probably is the better item still, but a flat win rate where the rec item has the same win rate as the non-rec item means it's actually stronger than we think it is. So like that's just an inherent bias that just exists, right? Every rec item is by definition going to have a deflated win rate because first timers are never going to manually go for the shop, but experts will on their champion. And so like I have like 30 games of Twitch this season, and the last Twitch game I played, I built no mythic, and I built IE fourth or something like that because it's like
I saw that print screen actually.
Because I'm getting like dove by a 11-0 Diana, and they have an Accolade. I'm like, we're going Wits End Hex Drinker. Like, there's no way around this. And it's like, a first time Twitch player's not going to do that, and I'm pretty sure made the right choice, and we won. That was great, but like. This is to go back to Infinity Edge second and data being valuable. Because it was a micro patch, there was a lot, like, no one ever, like, opened up League and it goes, oh, there's a patch, and hit play, and it's patching, and it's like, here's a 13.2 patch notes. Hey, by the way, Infinity Edge is 40% crit chance. And so, like, it takes longer for players to identify what's going on, which means anyone who is buying IE second means they understood the micro patch is going on, which means they're really engaged in the game, which means they're maybe probably still on climb because they're early on in the season, but they're playing a lot of active rank. Yes. And they're actually probably a good player, right? So there's a decent chance of like, oh, that's just a bias there. What's also interesting, even before the changes, IE second had like some small pick rate and had a really high win rate because if you're so far ahead, you're buying IE second, like even though you're clearly wrong, you're ahead, so you're going to win the game. It's weird. So it's often quite tough to pull valuable information out of pick rate. Out of item data. Like, it's valuable to see what players are doing. The other difficulty as well is when they have different price points. Because imagine a game where everyone's always collector or for gold shield.
Sorry, Phreak, I missed what you said there because of the lag for a moment. Could you repeat what you just said?
Yeah, okay. So what's also weird with item pick rate, win rate data is prices.
Oh yes,
create some really weird situations. So like imagine a world where you can build Locket or 2K for Radiant Virtue. In many I'm gonna overgeneralize. Let's say you can always make 2.5k gold even if it's a 20-minute surrender. And so every Nautilus ever can always finish Locket or they go for Locket, both the ones who are winning and the ones who are losing. And so you just get Nautilus like baseline win rate and Locket. That doesn't always happen, but like just pretend it. But if you always 2000, but you don't always get to like 3200. Only Nautiluses who got 600 more gold can finish Radiant Virtue. So every 50-minute surrender loss cannot be tracked in Radiant Virtue's win rate because you never bought it anyway. And every 20-minute surrender loss is never Radiant Virtue because you never got the money anyway.
Yes.
But if you won a 20-minute surrender, you had the because in a lot of those bot lane got 3-0 and you got first blood, you got 3 turret plates, you got first turret, whatever it is. And so Radiant Virtue, just by definition, measures different games. It measures games where you're ahead a little bit. And so it's really tough with price differences. It's a little bit less stark with things like Collector versus Shield Bow versus LDR, whatever. You know, anytime where you're buying Grievous Wounds as the AD carry, it's like, wow, no one on my team is buying Grievous. What are these idiots doing? Mundo's 10-0. I have to buy a Executioner's Calling. Well, it's an entirely different game state from regular AD carry games. Which means, like, immediately, like, all of your selection data is different. So it can be really, really tough to actually get value out of, like, any situational item buys, win rate and pick rate wise. I think in general, we would basically just say, hey, what does satisfaction look like? What does Q health for AD carry look like? What's the aggregate power level of AD carry in terms of, you know, their influence over the game? Are players building IE second? Okay, cool. And then I don't really care if IE second is optimal. Like, the fact that people like it is good enough for me. All I was really going for was as much satisfaction as possible, and I was willing to buy it with some power budget. But like, in a world where IE remains second, but we nerf them by level, or, you know, Shield Bow and Kraken Slayer has 5 less attack speed, or Zerg Greaves goes down a little bit, like, whatever, we can nerf AD carries, but like, they're still going to be enjoying that they have IE second, and then like, it'll be an overall positive for the game. So, you know, break things a little bit, can nerf later, but yeah, I don't really care if IE second is optimal.
Okay. I think that's fair. I really like the change. I really like the change.
Thanks.
And I still really like Phantom Dancer. I'm a Phantom Dancer enjoyer. I think in a lot of cases it's super strong, especially with the Kraken Slayer combos. But I think definitely the AD carries that had a rough time buying that second item are very benefited by it, and I think they were kind of left in such a power like dip at 2 items that it was just kind of boring and not you didn't feel impactful. So I think that the change really hit the mark. I thought the mana region changes also was super good. I was very happy that was, you came out of the gates and the first swing was beautiful.
I mean, the funny thing is, it definitely wasn't all me, right? So certainly getting IE to second was a big goal. But like, version 1 of the changes was every item has 25 crit chance and IE turns on at 50. And I also brought Bloodthirster down to like 2,800 and like cut its lifesteal to like 10 or something. I also tried buffing Nullifying Orb substantially, like just another you know, shield option that AD carries can get. And then giving Infinity Edge a unique passive where if you overcapped crit chance, it would give you even more crit damage. Like I swung really hard version 1 of the changes that never went to PvE, and they were like, this is way too much power. You cannot give us 25 crit chance. That's way too much. Also, Nullifying Orb like really mess with mid lane matchups, where just like Syndra doesn't get to play League. It doesn't get to play League anymore. And you just like, oh, just everyone poaches Nullifying Orb, and now mid lane mages are even worse. Okay, I don't need this to make AD carries feel better. They don't have to do this. Okay, cut that change. Obviously, Yasuo did really stupid things with overcap and crit chance. That could have been solved, but like didn't need to happen. And the mana change was actually from the team lead, Froxon, was like, hey, you know, if you're trying to get people to pick overkill, why don't you think about loosening their reliance on presence of mind? And like, I went back and forth with him a bit, but ultimately he was right, where it's like, actually, yeah, AD carries, I think, can be allowed to have a little bit more to spend in the mid to late game, right? So it's like, in terms of what actually shipped that patch, it's like 2 of them were original thoughts. 5 of my thoughts didn't shape up, and the other ones was someone else's idea. And it's like, I got all the credit, but like, I had like a 30% hit rate, you know? Like, let's be clear. It really was the team. And even just like calling out that we want to buff AD carry satisfaction was also not my call. That was, I mean, I grabbed it because I know AD carries really well. I've been playing that role for 14 years. So, you know, I tend to try to grab things that I'm passionate about or that I know pretty well. In general, like I like playing Lee Sin and Kayle, and I grabbed Lee Sin and Kayle buffs in the previous patch, like things that I thought were annoying about the champions, and so I buffed them. You know, again, AD carry kind of similar boat, where it's like, as a big AD carry player, I really don't like getting IE third. It feels really bad, and so that was like literally the first change was finding ways to get IE second, right? And so, you know, I'm glad I get to have that perspective and get to have, you know, some level of, you know, effect from what I know and what I'm doing, but I do want to make sure that credit is given where it's due to everyone else, because it's a lot.
All right. That's cool. I have a crazy idea. I'm going to run it by you.
Good.
And you're just gonna tell me, you're just gonna knock me down on the door. Let's pretend I come to you with a change that I want to implement. So I haven't thought it completely through, but I had this idea that if I think about tank items, right? And if I was playing a tank and I could choose the defensive components that I could throw into my item to complete, to have an effect, that is like a change that I would want, because sometimes some items are forgotten, and I feel like in the context I'm thinking about the chem tech, and sometimes I would want to have a Sunfire Cape, but I would want to have MR, and maybe I want the Iceborne Gauntlet, but I want to have MR instead of it. How does this idea sound to you on first impression?
I mean, I don't instantly hate it, right? I think there's a couple things going on here. Like the idea of, hey, give me more variety here is totally reasonable. I think in very broad strokes, so not in every single case, right? There is some value in hyping the way. So obviously some items are just like their armor items, the things that Frozen Heart does and Thornmail does.
Yes.
I mean, Thornmail is kind of getting a carryover from what it used to be in the old days, when it was a generic Grievous Wounds applicator. When we did Thornmail, actually, when we made it like on season 1, I emailed the designer back when I was a shoutcaster and was like, hey, would you mind swapping the stat profile with Randuin's? So that Thornmail is less armor skewed, since it's going to be bought as a generic Grievous Wounds applicator. And he's like, yeah, good idea. Cut some armor out, get more health, and moved Randuin's to be more armor, less health. Separating those stat profiles. So it's like there is like value in having that sort of, having that be genericized. I mean, there's a world where actually, Sunfire Cape should have armor and MR in it or whatever. I haven't given a lot of like in-depth thought to tank optimization overall. It's very easy to just give everything an Age of the Legion and be like, it's got 30 of each, move on. And that, I think, just like functions. But yeah, Sunfire Cape is a pretty generic output, but it's locked behind you wanting to buy armor. Visage is a very specific output that, I want to self-heal, but locked behind MR. And maybe that's okay, where you're like, actually, I know Visage is an MR item, and so I know that Maokai and Mundo and Zac and all these self-healers are going to be good into AP-heavy teams. And so when I see that's Rumble top, Kennen mid, and Sejuani jungle who's kind of half and half, but whatever, it's like, they're 1 AD. This is a Mundo or a Zac game. I'm going to buy a Visage in a world where Demonic and everything else aren't so OP that you can't buy this item in time. There's some value there, right?
Yes.
Now I know that can make Mundo players feel bad with like, I'm a Mundo player, you put me up against Renekton with a Kha'Zix jungle, I don't want to buy Visage here. Like, this feels bad. So there's give and take there, but I think there is at least some value. And maybe, again, on whole, on balance, it's correct to soften these back out. But I think there is at least some value. And so it's not like, it's obviously the right call to like genericize these items. Again, I'm not saying, for sure, this is the right way of going about it, but it's a thought. In a world where, additionally, it's like the learned behavior of knowing that this is an MR item, or, it's like, saying, I see Mundo has Sunfire Cape Thornmail. Oh, he's got a lot of armor. No, actually, hover over it. This is the magic Thornmail. This is the magic Sunfire Cape. And there's ways around that, right? Like Sheen and Lichbane and Trinity Force are different items with different stat profiles and different icons, right? There could be a Sunfire Cape and you just buy the that's probably reasonable. Again, not giving a ton of thought, but like maybe, right? Maybe it's okay that you can buy an MR Sunfire Cape and it looks different enough that players understand, and you get rid of all those problems and whatnot. That there might be room for that to be the valuable thing to do. I know, like, to a similar boat, like fighter players, but like, or like, hey, why isn't there an armor version of Wit's End or Hex Drinker, right? It's really hard to build AD health armor outside of building like an actual tank item or just AD and health. And maybe just the game shouldn't support that because it just makes the builds really awkward. I know we used to have problems way back when where the mid lane meta was both players rushed Abyssal Scepter because it was AP and MR and a good teamfight item, and it's like, well, we can't kill each other, but it's definitely my best item. And like, if every top lane, Cassante versus Renekton versus, Jace versus Set versus whatever matchup is like, yep, you always buy the AD health armor item, and now no one can die. Like that can create some bad problems. And at least when you're going AD MR, you're by definition buying different items from each other, right? One guy's going Wit's End, one guy might go Zonia's or might go something else, or like you at least get some more variation instead of like item A fights item A every time.
No, that makes sense.
Like
yes.
I think that tends to create kind of an issue. So there's good reason to not have like mirror items essentially.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You brought me back to the world. I remember when there was double Will of the Ancients meta.
Negatron first item. Yep.
Negatron first item too.
Yep.
Like I remember there was the Atmas with Warmogs that everyone bought every single game. The Frozen Mallet, Atmas Impaler, and there was just a battle of those items against each other in every single game. I definitely remember those times for sure.
Because they beat each other, right? That could be the issue.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask you in regards to the mage itemization. I've noticed, like now with Aurelion Sol's release, with the stacking component, with the Syndra rework, with the stacking component, and then Victor is also in that batch. Is that the idea are we going to see that on all the mages eventually, where there'll be like this stacking component? It seems like that's the go-to.
Think so. I'm curious if you really can draw a really like strong parallel there. I mean, certainly, like yes, you can point to examples. Vagar has this as well, sure, but
yes.
I don't think there's like this overarching goal of mages are going to turn into these linear scalars or whatever, or infinite scalars. I mean, Victor is. I mean, getting stacks off minions at the very least is a very easy way of just saying, look, let's kind of soften or like make more obvious how scaling works. Like, I think it's a better version of Hexcore than the old recall for 1150 gold to make sure you can get your first item online.
Yes.
Like I think it's probably a positive this way around. Aurelion Sol is he forges stars. I think it actually fits the thematic that he kind of becomes a raid boss.
For
like
sure.
I think it's actually really compelling and it fits the character. I think it's I would say a sort of better executed version of Vagar passive, right? And Vagar's a champion from 2009, right? And Aurelion Sol is champion from 2023. And so in terms of like they have the same passive, kind of. I mean, I'm overgeneralizing, but it's like Aurelion Sol's much cooler than my W cooldown's faster, right? So I think that's just designers got better on whole of making cooler abilities and making champions feel more satisfying. That's why reworks happen and whatnot, but Syndra was just like, well, instead of it being when you hit rank 5 of Q, it's when you get 40 Stardust or whatever. And like, I think so. Actually, might have been that the tuning was to try to fix some level of pro solo queue skew, right? So we talked about this earlier. Solo queue is much bloodier than pro play, and so if Syndra gets her revolves via kills and assists, or like much faster via kills and assists, you suddenly have a power lever that disproportionately affects solo queue. Because Syndra's been like a 47% win rate pro presence for 7 years. 10 years actually, right? She's always been a really bad mid laner and everyone but pro hands. And it's like, we're gonna mid scope her and give her a tuning lever that is specific to bloodiness, which is specifically a solo Q stat.
Oh, okay.
So now suddenly, right? Like even though it's another mage with stacking passive, it's like, I mean, this is a tool that we can certainly overuse, right? It's certainly possible to do. But in the way that early game is pro play skewed and high elo skewed, in the way that gold income is solo is pro skewed and high elo skewed because players are better at last hitting. You can do similar things with like, well, bloodiness is low elo skewed and solo Q skewed, and so you can buff things in ways that don't buff pro, and it's a really good tool for that. And as long as you can make it thematic, and like Syndra's whole thing was growing in power level and absorbing, right, and selfishly taking power for herself. Like that's part of her lore, if I understand correctly. And again, she already had it in her abilities via when I get max rank Q, I've unleashed the power. When I get max rank W, I unleash the power. And it's like, well, now you get 5 stacks on killer assist. And you still have this. Eventually, I evolve Q. Eventually, I evolve W. Eventually, I evolve E. But we go this way with it. So I think it's pretty clever. I think it was actually really good design. But I don't think it's the way like all mages should function.
Okay, I really I personally really like this type of system because I think I feel like the idea of what mages are is that they have that scaling curve and there are certain points where they feel a lot more powerful. And if the favor of the early game goes in the direction of the mage, it accelerates that process. And I like it in the idea that it's in the kit rather than only in items. So I personally really like this type of system. That's why I wanted to ask. I could imagine a world where maybe Oriana would have such a system where there would be something in place for her. But I think it's I like it.
You can do it simple ways with ability power rations, things like that as well. Where it's like, they really run off And so Oriana goes, from being, really good utility and wave control to she one-shots with a combo if she gets enough ability power. She gets to 4 items with a death cap, and she has 900 ability power. And now Artist does 2,000 damage in a full combo, and unless you built a Banshee's Veil or a Hex Drinker, she's going to one-shot you. And you can kind of have that just via very simple things like damage scaling and gold scaling.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, in League of Legends, right? I'm trying to think of the question, try to phrase this question properly. What is, in your mind, what is the importance of variance, right? I asked this question because in a lot of games, generally speaking, there's crit, and I know that's balanced out in a very specific way that I like about League. And as a competitor, I hate variance. For example, the rolling of dragons is random, right? And sometimes it can benefit you, sometimes it cannot benefit you. But what kind of a role does variance play in the balancing of a game, and what is its importance?
Yeah, I would say on whole, variance is really important. So a lot of my favorite games, in fact, pretty much all of my favorite games, I have played less than I've played of like Counter-Strike or League of Legends or Warcraft 3 PvP. Because like I played the Warcraft 3 campaign, I really liked it. I've played every Fallout game, sometimes more than once, and really liked them. There's a bunch of games I've played that these are really, really good games, and then I don't play them anymore because there's no more variations. It's I can listen to the same dialogue and the same and there's not a reason to do it. Whereas League of Legends, I'm on game number 15,000 or whatever, and it's different every time. Some of that variation obviously is because there's players on the other hand. This is like really obvious thing, and there's a bunch of champions and whatnot. But the game being different every time is what makes that interesting, because I have to think about the new context every time. And you get this via the Syndra got first blood, and so she's ahead, or the jungler path top and my jungler path bot. This is a game where we have bot prio, and we're going to stack dragons, and we can actually tower dive them. And so I can play this lane really aggressively, and Oz will be there for us, and we can go kill Nami 3 times pre-6, and I get to go pop off, and I'm ahead of the curve. I can 1v1 their bot lane by coming out of stealth and just pressing R and autoing them. And so variance on that degree is really, 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 really important.
For sure, yes.
You literally want a different experience going on.
100%.
Now, of course. Oh, yeah. So there are also ways to get it through random chance. Now, some of that again is the jungler's in Fog of War. I don't know if Kha'Zix is here. I don't know if Moon is coming down. I don't know whatever. So there's variance in that. Did he go for Gromp, or did he path down to the bottom river? And there's functionally variance that way. In terms of variance of individual fight outcomes, I don't think it's ultra important, right? But you have variance via the fact that skill shots are dodgeable. Not every Syndra QE lands. Even if you're Faker or Chovy or Showmaker, not every QE is going to land.
Yes.
Not every gank's going to work. Some is going to be warded. Some of the invades are going to be really cool, and you start the enemy jungler behind. And again, these aren't random chance. They're functionally guessing games. You're kind of playing rock paper scissors of when Malrang ganks bot, does he Q flash, or does he wait for you to flash and then try to flash follow? Nope, he Q flashed. Okay, well, the bot laner died. But if you wanted to guess that he's going to Q flash you, theoretically, Exekick, I forget who the AD character was. I think he's going to Q flash me and just flash out of nowhere. He just would have lived, and there wouldn't be first blood. And that is functionally variance because you're trying to mind read each other.
Yes.
Now, again, I know you asked about crit chance, right? There's very little of it. I would say that crit chance is much less offensive on auto attacks than crits on spells, and especially ultimates, and dodging, where beneficial crits feel good. Beneficial dodges feel much worse than they feel good on average. I'm glad League got rid of random dodge a long time ago.
Those expensive
and everything
seals.
else. Yeah. It was rough. Baron healing mid fight just feels out of your control and not fair, right? And missing your smite because of it, that's pretty rough. But I think there was good reason why crit held on longer than random dodge and things like that. There is value there, just because again you get to create high moments, and in retrospect you'd be it's because he got lucky, but I'm not saying it's for sure a great thing for the game. I don't know. I haven't given a ton of thought, so I can't tell you what my full opinion is because I haven't given again a bunch of consideration. But it's relative to all the other sources of RNG pretty inoffensive. I would say which elemental drink did we get? I don't think it actually means that much. Like, yes, there is some non-zero value in like, oh, Lucian missed this CS because he crit, whoops, and now the turret killed it, and now he didn't finish his IE on recall. Like, this can snowball into actually 1 in 10,000 games you lose because of crit RNG on your minion last hit, right? And there are games like, and it's measurable of like, oh, actually, it turns out Rengar weirdly isn't good on Ocean Rift because when your opponents heal to full health more reliably, you don't one-shot as well. You have more brush, but you don't have as many targets. So like weirdly, Ocean Rift actually nerfs Rengar win rate because his opponents on average are higher health. Yeah, it's weird, right? Old Ocean Soul, which gave a bunch of mana regen, actually I guess it still does, is actually Sona's worst soul because she already tops her team off. She doesn't need more. Like, yeah, her mana pool is healthy. Okay, so what? Like, you build tier anyway, and your teammate's already healing in the middle of combat. Like, they're either getting bursted or they're losing the game, or winning instantly. So it's like, it doesn't really matter to have more regen. You already out regen. You already win in the regen front. So things like that are like unintuitive. Yeah, there's things like that are kind of unintuitive. But yeah, again, this does have some pressure on who wins the game and loses the game. But like, I think the amount is really, really low in terms of like actually determining who wins the game. It's really, really low. Sure. And so it's like, well, okay, we are slightly lowering competitive integrity, but I think there are a lot of gains in terms of just having more variation in combat itself. Where like, wow, I crit that guy that felt really good. Like just creating memories at all, even if some of them are negative, I think is legitimately okay to defend. Again, I'm not ultra married to random crit chance, but I think crit chance is a much better feeling mechanic than Ashe passive, like by a lot. Even if it's more RNG and you can get unlucky, I think much more satisfying to interact with.
And the way crit works, right, is that if you don't crit, you have a higher chance of the next crit, and then it balances itself out always over time.
If you're autoing champions, it's going to roll you towards your baseline crit chance. I think it's still possible to get. I don't know. I have to look at the code. I don't have access to the code, to be fair. I don't know where it's even stored, but yeah, like it is pseudo random in PvP crits.
Okay. Yeah, I know the Tryndamere always leverage this. They punch the minions, and then after they didn't crit, they roll in, and then they have a higher chance.
But it doesn't stack on minions.
Oh, really?
It specifically does not stack on minions, yeah. So at least the way it was like, it just sort of rolled you up, and then people would actually try to convert crit from minions to there. But specifically, because I know the designer who worked on it, I remember he actually talked to me about this. I was like, do you know how to math this out? Like, what like the right kind of formulas? Like, I'm not good enough math nerd for that. But yeah, when this got added like 2013 or something, he like specifically it only amps in PvP combat. You cannot amps in PvE.
Or maybe it's just once again my anecdotal evidence.
Sure. Or it got changed somehow, right? But the designer who implemented the system in the first place specifically made it PvP only.
Okay, because I remember a lot of Tryndameres leveraged this, but maybe it was just luck and my own experience.
I mean, it's worth noting that if you attack minions much, people will rage and factually have higher crit chance, right? Like that is just how his champion works.
Yes, that's true. I agree. League of Legends, like I try to think of what is RNG in League, and I could only think of the Drakes. I could only think of crit. I could think of Zoe Bubbles.
Oh sure, yeah, she can get and to be fair, like the really abusive ones were like, this is bad for the game, and like she doesn't get level 5 TP anymore, right?
Yes.
Like there are some things that are like, oh yeah, this is way too much, right? So like there clearly is some level of tolerance, right? And I didn't work on any of that stuff, right? I've never done any design changes for Zoe, but like they have removed things from the pool, right? Because it's like this is level of tolerance. So there is an eye to it.
I wanted to ask you because you mentioned yourself, like you mentioned what your ideal vision of how pro play would look like, where there's identities and you have that level of exploration of what teams could play and how different they could be. Is there like a mission state? Is there like a goal that the whole design team has that you're trying to follow through? Is there like some pillars that you're trying to follow through with every decision that you make that underlines everything?
I'm not sure. Maybe there is like a document somewhere. I haven't read it. If there is, I mean, in general, it's there's a bunch of like the game better. So to be clear, there are a bunch of pillars for like gameplay on League of Legends as a whole, right? Of making good experiences. The game being balanced is important. Like there are generically there are values, right? I don't know if there are values specific to how game balance is done on League of Legends, like on a more like sort of sub goal level. Again, there are things that I consider valuable, like the abilities you max should make sense, and having some amount of choice in what items you build. Even if players don't think there is choice, there's often a lot more choice people give credit for. That's the weird thing, is people don't think they have room, but there's a lot of room. Runes, items, things like that, summoner spells. I mean, how long does it take an AD carries to stop running heal? When like clearly cleanse, ghost, exhaust are actually all really good viable options, and people just like ran heal for 18 years straight.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's like you literally have supports who build healed and shield power items,
yes.
and you're still making them run exhaust, and you're running heal. Like at a certain point, 2017 was like the obvious point where it's like, you stop doing this. Come on, let the Sona run heal. Minor stuff there. Like, why is Sona running ignite? Don't you want the last hit? Just like switch summoner spells. Anyway, so I really value choice and whatnot. I think there is room for having like a big discussion on, if we want to do. I will say that I've certainly gotten pushback a number of times where it's like, oh, hey, we could nerf Twitch here. His win rate's pretty high. We could nerf Ashe here. She's pretty popular in pro play. But the question brought back is, okay, well then, who should be the most popular pick then? Right? Or should we just play Whackamole forever with every time someone's the number one pro pick? You're just like, well, Rise number one this patch, bonk. Oh, Lucian number one this patch, bonk. Or it's like, well, Lucian as the highest prio AD carry is more interesting than Sivir is the highest prio AD carry. Because at least he creates action, right? If you first pick Lucian, you must be trying to get lane pressure and take Drakes and like do things. And he's really flashy in team fights. Okay, Sivir's ideal gameplay is nothing happens and then I show up with 3 items. Right? Like, and so Sivir's Zeri is like very safe. You talked about this on your stream a little bit ago. Like Sivir's Zeri is a pretty safe lane where it's like, yep, we're gonna go low volatility and scale. I'm like, okay, so bot lane is no action. Sport's gonna roam mid. Okay, well, bot lane is no action. Okay, so top lane is Ornn versus Sion. Okay, so top lane can have no action. No one's gonna do that. Okay, cool. So mid lane is Azir versus Corki. Okay, so I'll see you in 25 minutes when it's team fights. Right? Like, okay, well, maybe that's not a very good pro meta, right? Whereas like, oh yeah, it's Lucian, it's Akali Sylas, it's like Renekton Jax, it's Sejuani Vi. Like, oh, all these champs want action. That's a much better pro meta than what I talked about 2 minutes ago, right? So in a world where, we're like, no, we're not going to Whack-A-Mole, it's like, I think it's okay if Renekton is 70% presence in pro for the rest of time. Now, is he the literal best pro champion? No. But Renekton wants to create action. He wants to tower dive, he wants to roam to objectives, he wants to go fight, and he puts his team on a clock. And so, like, I would much rather 80% presence Renekton than 80% presence Ornn. Because Ornn's little gameplay is, okay, he's a good laner, but like nothing happens, and then I upgrade your items when we team fight. Nope, that's fine if it's viable. Like, I'm super down for Ornn to be viable. TSM, I'm sure, really likes that they have takes to play in the top lane. But like, again, I want a variety. I want, if you're gonna play weak side into YSKM or the Shire or something, then like, okay, I'm gonna play Sion. You're gonna play Fiora and Style on me. But I'm not going to play Jax. I'm not going to win. I'm going to play Sion. It's going to be at least passable. And I will lose my tower, and I will lose First Herald, but at least I can team fight. And, like, as long as that's available to you, great. Right? Good job. As long as you have, the variety of playstyles are out there, good. I think, I would bias towards aggression being good. I would much rather a Renekton Jax meta than, or Renekton Fiora or Jace Fiora or whatever, than Ornn Sion, again, to be clear. I'm actually kind of quite glad that Gragas is AP Gragas. Because I remember the Sion Gragas meta from last year, and it was tank Gragas, and it was a really, really boring top lane, and nothing happened there. And they just showed up in team fights. So yeah, like in a lot of these places, like I actually quite liked the Worlds meta, and even though it was a Kali's house every game, they're both aggressive champions, which meant that like at least cool things happen in a mid lane. And enchanters are largely lane bullies. At least for playing, Zeri stuff, but Yuumi was banned pretty much the entire time, so it was mostly lane bully enchanters instead, and so stuff happened. And so, largely that's right. If we're gonna get it wrong, I would like to get it wrong on the side of aggressive things are good. And if we're in a full aggro pro meta, that's much less urgent than full tank pro meta.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I feel like I understand from the coaching side. I can relate to the issue of playing Whack-A-Mole because I got a lot of flack. I got a lot of flack for not banning Yuumi, but what a lot of all of the fans outside of the team didn't understand was that if we banned Yuumi, we just didn't have an answer into Lucian Nami. And that would have been a lot worse. So I got a lot of shit for the Yuumi thing, but opening Yuumi allowed us to secure Lucian Nami, which was our strongest champions in our context. And if the enemy opened Lucian and we banned Yuumi, we just couldn't play Lulu on the patch. And that was like our weakness. Right. So we opened Yuumi just to be in a position that might be bad in theory, but what was behind that door was just way worse. So I can definitely relate to the idea of playing Whack-A-Mole, that if these get banned, maybe the next thing, as mentioned before, is like I wanted Ashe. I mentioned that I wanted Ashe Caitlyn to be nerfed, but then maybe Draven is going to dominate, and then he's going to be the guy, and then it will go in circles. I can definitely see that for sure.
It's not that Draven's a bad pro play champion. He's actually really cool, and I'm glad Draven is out there at like 25% presence or whatever. I think it's lower than that, but I haven't looked recently. But yeah, it's like as long as the counter exists, and we can go in circles, and some teams, are good at tanks, and some teams aren't, and then it feels okay. Like that's really my goal, right? Like I would really, really love, and I don't think we've really ever gotten to this point long term, but like it would be really, really cool if again we just have teams with a bunch of different play styles and they just play really different champions because it's what they're good at. And it's like, yes, people actually believe that Graves, Sejuani, and Vi all have the same power level. And Team A, their jungler's really good at Graves, and Team B, their jungler's really good at Vi. And it's like, well, they're not going to pick each other's champion because that's their power level. And it's like, okay, great. Like, that'd be the ideal.
Yes.
I don't know if we'll get there, but it'd be cool.
I can also... Like I also wanted to mention, because you talked about how range versus melee and how it interacts in terms of the power budget. Always when I have explored the idea of how to approach fights, I feel like the generally speaking, I feel like the power budget always kind of makes sense in terms of champions. It's like when you have the longer the range you have, the weaker you are in close range combat and these elements. Yep. I really like that fact about League of Legends. I think I think it's really fun to talk about the concept of how you set up fights and how you prepare for fights, because I think that there is a very obvious red line in champion design, I feel. I think that's super cool. I'm curious how the world would look like, because I'm curious how the world would look like now, because Gale Force was added into the game, because mobility became something that was more and more common, which brings me to this world. What would happen in a world where like Flash wouldn't exist? And it brings me back to the 500 gold crab thing. It just gets my mind excited, And I wonder if there's some game modes that could be very interesting for people like us that are hiding behind this,
So I think Flash is actually really good for the game. This actually goes back to re-adding variance. So the fact that Flash is a 5-minute cooldown means that one in 5 fights has Flash involved, and the other 4 don't.
Yes.
Obviously, in pro play, it's like 80% of fights have Flash involved because they fight less frequently. But like, you think about like, hey, what does Alistar do against Karma level 1 in a bot lane? And it's literally nothing unless he has a jungler and he flash pulverizes. Otherwise, there's no gameplay. He has nothing he can do. But if he's willing to flash pulverize, then you have exactly one window where you get to do a really cool play, and it's like, yeah, Lee Sin level 2 ganked you. Actually, we're fighting the middle of the second wave, and I flash pulverized you, and Lee Sin landed Q. Variance, right? And in most games, Carver doesn't have to care about this. And now he's down Flash. And of course, now Hex Flash exists, but now he has to channel in a brush without being seen, otherwise they back up and he wastes the 20-second cooldown. But like, without Flash, this is deterministic. There is nothing you can do skill expressive at all. Alistar does not have any game he can play until he gets until he gets headbutt. And then now you just play 800 range. And it's like, okay, as long as we're outside of headbutt range, he can't do anything. Nothing can happen ever. We will never die. Nothing's gonna happen. But if he's willing to flash and pulverize you or whatever, like, he headbutts a minion, flash pulverizes you, and now Elise is here. It's like, oh, variance. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of like long cooldown, big effects. I think Ultimate's really good for this as well, where you just don't want the game to be, something can surprise you, something can happen, and that's really, really valuable. It's what's cool about skill shots. I think we do have some like targeted stuns that are, you look at Violet, you look at Malzult, things like that. Like they're really, really strong and they're really, really reliable. But most things aren't, and that's like a good thing. I mean, even Vi, it's like, oh, we picked Xayah into it or Morgana, and so we can block shield or dodge or whatever. And now Vi ult is actually unreliable, and like, oh, that's interesting. He has to like make choices. So yeah, in terms of like, oh, what if there's less mobility with no flash? You have a much flatter experience where it's like, oh, we can't win. It's not playable anymore. They have tank, we don't. It can't be won. But it's like, oh no, we have an Akali who TP flanked, and so she got behind the back lines and she created essentially variance because she's actually not fighting past the Malphite or the Ornn or whatever. She's directly on top of Ashe, and so that champion is dead. And there's a certain amount of baseline you want to have. You don't want a clown fiesta, right? I think this needs to be in pretty constant tension. There has to be some level of structure. It's why any phase is good. It's why I think there are probably slightly too many ganks right now. Is that there's too much variance in top lane and bot lane. Mid lane I think feels relatively safe. But it's like, yeah, what if, like, imagine if all turrets were 300 units forwards, and so you're much less diveable. Or imagine all turrets do double damage. Or imagine jungle camps spawn 20 seconds later, so that you can't leash them, and you know, their gank is 20 seconds later. So you're for sure level 3 by the time the jungler shows up.
I think junglers are gonna gank you level 1 and then do camps.
Yeah, they go to a camp. Right. So like, you know, you have to be careful about that, right? Just Twitch shows up and just, you know, ganks your Akali from stealth. So, you know, you don't have a lot of leverage there, right? There's only so much you can move. But like, right, junglers introduce variance, you know, having mobility skills that snap your fingers increases variance. Having skill shots that can miss, and not from RNG, but because you missed or they dodged or whatever. Like that's really, really good for the game, because you don't want to be deterministic, right? You want games where it's like, okay, we're losing, like we're behind, but like all the damage skills are non-targeted, and there's Fog of War, so maybe we get a good gank off, maybe we sneak Baron, maybe Vi doesn't flash the thing in time, you know, like that's really, really valuable.
Okay. I wanted to get your take on like there's this length of text on abilities creep with each champion released. Okay. And in my mind, I think it kind of makes sense because you want to release interesting champions. It's like Aurelion Sol, super excited. I played 2 normal games. That's all the time I had to play Aurelion Sol, and I had so much fucking fun. It's like when I really love the game. I had a lot of fun. I don't have this nihilistic view that sometimes the community has as a sentiment on the social media, whatever. I love the game. I had a lot of fun with Aurelion. So I understand trying to create very interesting champions to play. But what is your take on this? It's like the whole text creep, so to speak.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think you're probably on whole right that there is text creep in the game, but also that's like 75th in line of things that matter about how good video games are. So I think it's different if you're, well, I guess I'll say like, hey, what does Aurelion Sol Q do? Like in your own words, what does Aurelion Sol Q do?
This fucking breathes fire.
Great, cool. There's the ability. Doesn't matter how long the paragraph was.
True.
He breathes fire, hits the first guy. It like ticks for damage, I guess, a couple of times, but like he breathes fire in a line. Congratulations.
Yeah.
If the tooltip read Aurelion Sol breathes fire in a line, you'd be like, yeah, it's the ability. And you hold shift, there's a paragraph of like what it scales off of, but like playing against Aurelion Sol, I know what Aurelion Sol Q does. His W, I fly. I fly that way. All right, that's W. That's one sentence. You know, like, who cares? You know, what's Cassandra Q? Oh, it's Yasuo Q. Like Cassandra Q is Yasuo Q, except that the tornado flings you backwards. Okay, like, you know, I think that can get really awkward when you have like actually complex abilities where it's like, hey, what does Rel E do? Rel E picks a target, then it goes on cooldown, and you cast it again, and then people around the target and the live gets stunned. Oh, yeah, it's kind of tough. Right? I don't know how long your tooltip actually is, to be clear, but like Rel E is actually way more complicated than I breathe fire in a line. I don't know which one has a longer paragraph on the tooltip. It actually might be Aurelion Sol, right? But like, does it matter? No. So I think it's just like not that important. It's easy to, right? And for sure, I think like, hey, if kits get overloaded, and I think what's kind of actually happening is I think, again, very broad strokes, like maybe we slightly don't fully appreciate like the high movement speed of some of our dashes. So like Aurelia is way better at dashing than Yasuo. But like when Yasuo came out in like 2014 or whatever, it was like, what? He has infinite dashes on a 0.5 second cooldown? It's like, and then of course we have Aurelia who, you know, her rework was a couple years ago, and it's like, well, as long as it can last at the minion, which to be fair is a specific ask, it's at a certain damage point, then yeah, you can zip around and do cool things. But also the move speed on that dash is like twice as fast as Yasuo's. The range is like 3 times as high as Yasuo's. And she can, you know, pretty much free target to an enemy champion when she needs to, but then it goes on cooldown. It's like, well, is the range too high? Is the speed too high? And maybe the answer is no to both those things, but it's like, okay, well, champs have gotten faster. Okay, sure. You know, the fact that Aurelia has a meaningful reset mechanic, and to be fair, Aurelia, like initial Aurelia Q has existed since 2012 or whatever, right? Or 2011 or something. So it's not like it's even that different, but like, it's faster post rework. I don't know about the range difference, but like, you know, there's certainly more rules there than, you know, Yasuo E, where it's like P dash forward a straight line is a certain amount and a certain speed. But okay, yeah, maybe the game has gotten more complex, but the game getting more complex is maybe correct. Like maybe League is actually at its best when it is a more complex game and there's more going on in the abilities. I mean, you know, we don't release a lot of Garens and Annies out there. I mean, Annie E got her update, and really the only change was that E reflects damage on spells now. But people are like, yeah, cool, great, thanks. And I mean, it adds a line of rules text to the E, right? It now applies on spells and only applies once per spell. There's actually two lines of text, right? It applies once per champion, I guess, to be fair, instead of every single time. Yes. But those are the only, like, the fact that Tibbers scales durability off of AP is like, that doesn't matter. Like that's not functionally rules, right? That you don't have to learn anything to learn that ability. But like, okay, modernizing it actually kind of helped a little bit. That's probably a good thing. Okay, great. Again, Aurelion Sol is pretty straightforward. His E is infinite stacks, his ability to scale with that. I guess his R sometimes converts. Okay, he has two R's kind of. Like, okay, that's a little bit of complexity. But I don't know. I'm kind of like circling a very large point I'm giving a ton of thought to.
Yes.
Like, I think we probably have more complex over time. I think it's maybe an okay thing. I think calling out paragraph length is probably not the right way of calling that out. I think if you're like, Action's ability does 3 unique different things, that's a more reasonable Reddit thread than look how long the tooltips are on the LOL wiki.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. Yeah, I love the point about Aurelion Sol Q. I think that's perfect. I think visual clarity as well, I think is also so important, and I think Aurelion Sol has. I think everything is very, very visually obvious, and I think that in comparison to other games, I think has done a good job of maintaining visual clarity. I think most of the time. Like sometimes when I watch other games, I think it's whoa. Often I'm asking myself when people complain about certain things, what are they comparing to? It's like, especially when it comes to balance. I think balance, if I think about some other games, it's like that game gets one patch every 6 months and one gun is dominating the meta forever and everyone's complaining about it and nothing is moving. Like I've seen those games. So I'm very happy about League of Legends balance. I think the team has done a wonderful job.
I'm glad. Thanks.
I wanted to ask you now because you of course you have this vast library in your mind. In your mind, when you think back of past seasons, what was peak meta for you?
I don't know. What's interesting for me is I actually thought about this earlier the other day or yesterday because but either way, I don't have a strong feeling of what was like ideal. I certainly really, really liked last year's Worlds because I think, as far as an esports tournament, it was a pretty aggressive meta game. There was a really good amount of variety. Most roles were played pretty aggressively, which is generally a good thing. Like kills were pretty high, if I recall correctly. And again, champ variety is really, really good. So in general, that works pretty well for me. I always like being able to identify things that are broken and get to use them before everyone else does. So, like, I was on the Ardent Sensor hype train before other people were. So 2017, I think, was the year. Like, I was spamming Relic Shield Sivir in 2017, like, Spring Split. And, like, I would have choices around, like, oh, when would I upgrade to Tier 2? Would I ever go Tier 3? What was I buying? But it's, like, literally every game, before any of the pro teams are doing it, I was Relic Shield Sivir every game. I've been willing to play a bunch of mages in the bot lane. I've been playing a Mumu jungle a fair bit, and now we're seeing it in pro play a little bit. We saw it in LEC today. We saw it in LCS last 2 weeks. But it's like Mumu's been actually a pretty good jungler for a while, and it's like, yeah, you go Demonic Embrace. Demonic is a really, really good item. You just build this. It's fine. Just identifying like good counter picks and good champion picks. Like, hey, I'm playing a bunch of Twitch right now, and Twitch's ban rate is growing because he's a like jungle support AD carry mid flex pick, and actually quite strong in most of those roles. But like I was getting him for a while. During like the entirety of 13.1, I was getting a ton of Maokai games in before everyone else realized they should be banning him, and he was the best champion. Like they were on the Kassadin train, but they weren't on the Maokai train yet. They were on the Kassadin Zac train. And so I just like being ahead of the meta. It's just kind of fun for me. So finding things to do. The longest that was understanding the Ardent Sensor is just absurdly broken, and I can just go Relic Shield every game. So like selfishly that was a good one for me because I just got to abuse stuff. I would say I really, really liked getting a multi-direct for the first time and playing around with that stuff. Like that was really, really enjoyable. That was the last big shakeup I can remember. I feel like seasons passed and I'm like, okay, we got trinkets in 2014. That was cool. But like I don't know what we got seasonally outside of like elemental drakes and trinkets and then mythic items. Like I can't think of off the top of my head, like what were the big seasonal updates in not those years? That were like, oh, the overall game is different now because this rules change now exists. So that's just that always sparks my interest is having some new rules play around, having to like figure out the game again, and then if I can be first, that feels really good.
No, I am exactly the same. It's like I also try to think back of like the time where I enjoyed myself the most, but I feel I'm just in tune with what's going on and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And if I think of myself, do I feel the most excited is when I know the least.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then it's like this exploration, and then there's like almost this race to find a way to break the game. I think that's always been super, super interesting, for sure.
Yeah. It's what's felt really good about game design so far is looking at day one of the patch and seeing player behavior changes. So like my first patch, I buffed Axiomark. And like looking at Nocturne in like 12.23 or 24, whatever, and it's like, oh, Axiomark is his like 5th most popular first item and his 4th most popular second item. And then in 13.1, it's his most popular second item. And it's like, cool, a bunch of Nocturne players went, I'm going to try this. And I'm like, I got players to try something new. That's awesome. And they didn't all stick around with it, right? But like the item got stronger and he had some builds going on, like, but they did it. And the support buffs that came in just a couple days ago, like, top lane Nautilus and Alistair's pick rates like quadrupled. It's not very good in either case, but like a bunch of people like went to go try it. They're like, I want to try Wizard Cow. I want to try, Wizard Anchorman. And again, they're not very strong, but that's okay. But like seeing Thresh's pick rate go up, seeing, Rakan's pick rate go up and Brahm's pick rate go up, and I was like, yeah, cool. People went to go play a new thing. I got to provide them a little bit of like, they're going to go do this thing now. I think it's really, really cool. So I actually really like these like low scope champion changes kind of as content. Because it's like, oh, cool, I want to go play the new thing. And so that's kind of, it's something that like drives me a lot, is like, oh, can I make this fun and like exciting to go try out?
No, I love that approach. That sounds perfect, actually.
Yeah, it's fun.
Is there anything that you've monitored? Like maybe you can't spoil it, right? Is there anything you've monitored that is like really low play rate and it's like on the cusp of, we have to make sure that people play this champion is good, but no one's playing it. The champion is fun, but no one's playing it. Is there something like that?
So there's certainly like if we think it's fun but no one's playing it, that means it's probably not very fun. Is kind of the TLDR there, right?
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is power versus pick rate basically is a pretty good indicator of hey, maybe we should consider a mid-scope update, right? So like Aurelion Sol has been strong for his entire life. Like he's always been high win rate. It's not just because only mains play him. That's a lie. Like Katarina and Yasuo have way more like main percentage than Aurelion Sol does. Riven's up there too, for example. Zyra's really up there. A bunch of other champions that have way more than Aurelion Sol. Like pick rate is not mastery rate. I want to be really clear about this. But yeah, so Aurelion Sol's been strong forever. He's been a really cool concept forever, but ultimately players didn't really like playing Orbiting Sunfire Cape. And so he breathes fire instead, which is way cooler, right? I mean, TLDR, right? His iconic ability was I have these balls that surround me, and it's just like, unfortunately, it just wasn't something that people really, really liked. The idea is really cool. Oh, I am a star, like things orbit me. Like the flavor of that is awesome, right? Like literally things are in my orbit because I'm that big is a really cool thing. Unfortunately, they didn't really translate well into gameplay because it's really, really low agency. I wait for the circle to come around is unfortunately not a compelling gameplay hook. And in another world, maybe, if we had what we know now back then, we would have been like, well, unfortunately, this gameplay isn't working. Let's delay him. Let's find a new gameplay hook, move on from there, whatever. Either way, New Aurelion Sol still flies around the map. He still forges stars. He still has somewhat kind of similar abilities. But he breathes fire. It's like, that's way more dragony than I wait for the balls to come around, right? I literally breathe fire, and I breathe fire while flying. Oh, way cooler. Oh, I throw a comet onto the ground. Yeah, way cooler, right? So, even though you kind of just like swapped like, aside from deleting his old W, it's like it's kind of the same abilities. You could almost reuse all the art assets and have that champion, But with assets, like, oh, way cooler champion, you did it, good job. Annie is in a boat where like all they really did was say like, look, your timbers will actually scale with ability power a bit, and his move speed will scale a little bit with rank. And your shield is going to be like way more consistent because it'll work on the little lane opponents you're against, because when they cast spells on you, it'll return damage. And okay, she was overpowered, but like, congratulations, you did a lot for people wanting to play Annie again. It's some relatively simple changes. I was like, yeah, good job. Like, that's really cool. I want to revitalize Rumble by making him a good top laner again, and making him less of a I level 6 dragon fight the champion. And we'll see if it's good or not. I don't think it's like as big as Aurelion Sol or Annie or anything, but if it goes well, then hopefully Rumble Main's gonna be happy, and we're gonna double his pick rate, and that'll be really cool, and he gets to be a good top laner again. Like that would be great because that would be really gratifying. It happened. Right? 80 carries. We knew we're actually strong. And like weren't actually weak, but players were like, this role sucks, and no one wants to play it. And except in High Elo, where they have the mechanics to kite well. And it's like, okay, well if people can't kite well, I can let you opt into durability. Like I'm not very good at the game, so I can buy Bloodthirster and get overheal. Okay, great. Like go for it, right? That should help you feel better against Protect and diving you. And there's a bunch scarier changes that like maybe won't pan out. But like, right? How do I make things more fun without making them more powerful? And it's like, I think Aurelion Soul was great. I think Annie was great. I think IE second certainly was power, but Satisfactory Power was very good. And so, let's do those things. How much can we do of that? So, so like we're very aware of like power does not match perception of power or does not match appetite. And finding ways to bring up appetite is really important. And it's harder than just like make Kale weaker or make Kassadin weaker. That's very easy. Like Kassadin's changes took me very little time to ship. But like making Rumble more fun is a much more subjective thing and harder to do.
For sure. No, I'm very happy that that's like something that is important. I think that's. Yeah. I also think it's important. So I'm very happy that it's important. I wanted to ask you because you mentioned Fallout. I know that you have history of Warcraft 3. What are your main sources of inspiration in other games? Like what has shaped the mind of Phreak? Yeah.
I'm a huge RPG nerd. So I wouldn't say I've played everything, but like, I was gaming in the 90s, right? I'm 35. So yeah, original Fallout series, special place for Fallout Tactics. Just shout out everyone who actually appreciates that game. What's cool is actually the tech lead. This is a random story. The tech lead of like either League of Legends or League of Legends gameplay, was an engineer on Fallout Tactics. And so like he's like an ultra important boss in terms of like how, so like when stuff was on fire and we were like trying to get the micropatch going from like the social engineering attack and 13.2 got canned, like he's the engineer in charge of like, what are we even allowed to build? And like, what are we allowed to ship and whatnot? And like, he worked on one actually my favorite games. I actually really like Fallout Tactics. But like, I've spent so long looking at RPG systems because I've always been a big numbers nerd as well. So it's like, oh, how does Fallout 1, 2, Tactics 3, 4, New Vegas, how do those handle character progression? How does Dungeons and Dragons do it? How does Baldur's Gate do it? How does Divinity Original Sin do it? How does Mass Effect do it? How does Dragon Age do it? How does, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just played so many of those systems. So it's like, okay, cool. I have a really good, and I've played some roguelikes, not a ton, but like some Darkest Dungeon, Hades, things like that. But it's, it's interesting because I got really into character progression as like a system before it caught on as something that like went into like Assassin's Creed, right? Because before it was like, oh, the only thing with character progression are RPGs. And it's like you played Fallout or you played like Halo, and just like you just played Halo, right?
Yes.
It's just, here's your character, and you got guns, and like Doom, you got guns, but like, oh, Doom Eternal has like relics you pick up, and you like literally get powers. You get like you actually get like objective character progression.
Yes.
Like the original Fear had like health vials, and you would like gain more max health over time and more bullet time duration. And it's like, oh, okay, more games are like roping character progression. What's nice about MOBAs is, character progression is actually pretty core to how the game works. And what's nice is I've just played so many games where character progression is a like core part of how you play the game that like, oh, okay, cool. Like I have a really, really wide library of things I've played that have done character progression and like what I think works in a single player, like no time pressure, turn-based RPG, with like static loot, what works in a game like League of Legends. In general, I think actually we should make legendaries more simple, but do specific things. So like I think, for example, like Void Staff and Death Cap and Lord Dominic's Regards are really, really, really good items. Because what they do is very obvious. They don't require any more APM from you. I think there's some value in having items, be relatively flat across player skill. But like, yeah, your skill is not losing to Boris. And it's like, just buy the right thing, not necessarily be good at using the thing. I think there's room for active items, right? Like Gale Force and whatnot, and Zonias are very skill testing items. That's fine. It's not like a problem. But like, I also don't really want you to play a 10 button champion. Like, I think that's probably too much. On average, and like maybe you can opt into it, and 6 item supports has Mikhail's and Locket and Zonia's, and we keep going from there. Like maybe that's okay if you opt into the play style, and that's all right. But making items like make a lot more sense. Like, hey, it would be nice if Abyssal Mask was strong enough to be worth buying, because there's a lot of games where Abyssal Mask probably should make sense. where I'm supporting a double AP team comp, and they have to have even though it's a very specific niche. That's a cool niche, and the item is ideal here. That's cool. Like choosing Maw or Wit's End or not. When do I buy these things? Like having sharp stat profiles is actually a pretty good thing for choosing when I buy stuff. And I know that can be really weird when it's like, you talked about tank items earlier, where it's like, well, I want the Sunfire Cape output. I want a Bomby Cinder, and if I want to upgrade the Bomby Cinder, I have to buy a Chain Vest. And it's like, well, okay, there's a strategic layer of like, if I need Sunfire, okay, are they physical heavy or not? Or it's like, okay, well, I'm just playing Aurelia, and if Aurelia goes Wit's End or Ma or Death's Dance, she's still Aurelia and like still functions no matter which one you build. But you're going to build them in different orders based on what you're against. And like, great, you're making choices, right? And you're a bit different based on what you buy, right? Like you're a bit better at team fighting on whole if you buy Death's Dance, and you're way more DPS if you buy Wit's End. But like, okay, that's fine. But you're building because you're up against Silas, or you're building because you're up against Renekton. And again, LDR existing and existing for AD carries, and do I buy Shield Bow and whatnot? Like, they do really obvious dumb things. And you're choosing like, yes, I need this obvious dumb thing. I need durability, so I'm going Shield Bow. I need to kill Ornn, so I'm building LDR. I need to, whatever else this thing. Like, I think items work really well there in League, where they don't take up mindshare outside of making the pathing choice and then giving players enough gold that they can make those choices 3 or 4 times. And it's like, well, if I'm hardbound to always buying IE, that's one less choice. If I'm hardbound to always buying exactly one Mythic, that's one less choice. Ooh, I only get one item choice. That can be tough. So, you do want choice in all those areas.
Okay. I have actually never thought of MOBAs in the context of character progression at all. But the way you drew from it actually makes a lot of sense. And you have very good taste in games, I must say.
Thanks.
I've also...
I definitely do.
Like, I grew up on playing... the first game I ever played, which was probably not the best game to play as a child, it was Diablo 1. And then I played Warcraft 2. I was like, all of the Blizzard games were like the games
same.
that were being played in my household. And then Baldur's Gate was just a personal favorite. It's like, I played that when I was 10, and I just could never beat it. But it was just so intriguing to play those characters. And the game was just so difficult for me. It just didn't make any sense. And then sometimes, once a year, I come back to that game, and then I just do a playthrough and just massacre everything just because I know that game inside out,
Nice, that's cool.
Baldur's Gate is definitely amazing. I wanted to ask you, so I know that you have history in Warcraft 3. But I'm unsure what the history is. I remember seeing this picture, like that you had a connection with. Like, did you cast with Monte Cristo at some point in Warcraft 3?
I don't know. So my Warcraft 3 story basically is I got good around the time Frozen Throne launched. I like semi-pro around like freshman year of college. So I played in a world championship. I got 5th. There's a deep meme of being top 5 world. That's not really accurate, but like I tied for 5th in a world championship right after another player got memed for calling himself top 8 in North America.
Okay.
He wasn't, and so like that it carried over, and so top 5 world is a very, very niche meme for me. I think realistically, like I don't think I'd be like an all-time like top 30 player, but like when I was at my best, I was probably about top 30 players in the world. And I was like the best Night Elf player outside of Europe and Asia, which like it's the Americas and Australia, but it was still true. So like I was good, not amazing, right? And so I was on for like the largest parts of my career, I was on a team called Verge Gaming. And the team manager, like we did, like, sort of like organize the Warcraft 3 team, like, oh, here's when the matches are and whatnot. That was Monte Cristo.
Oh, damn.
He ran like virtual efforts on the Warcraft 3 team I was on. I don't remember if we ever cast Warcraft 3 together. I didn't do a lot of in-person Warcraft 3 casting gigs. I did 2 or 3. I cast a world championship. I cast a regional qualifier. Maybe one of them was with Monty. I can't remember. Like I did the EWC Grand Finals in San Jose, and I don't remember who I was casting with there. I remember casting like one of the World Championships, and I cast that with Bunny, who at least last I checked was a producer at Blizzard, and has been for a while. I cast a regional qualifier for one of the World Championships that I think was solo. And I think those were the only like 3 professional casting gigs. Everybody else was like, oh, I just did it online in my bedroom, on a fan site that I can recall anyway. This I'm forgetting. I got flown to Korea to do casting or something. Maybe that was with him. I don't remember. Yeah, maybe. Like, but there was some sporadic work. I don't remember who I was casting with at every point in time.
Yes.
But yeah. Anyway, we knew each other from Warcraft 3.
Because I don't know why, but I have like a really vague memory of like a picture of the two of you together, which could be like completely fabricated in my mind. We cast
League of Legends at MLG like 2012-ish or something.
Okay.
So like he was there as a caster, relatively early on in League's history. But I don't know if I've cast Warcraft 3 with him.
Okay. My biggest achievement in the Warcraft 3 world was to get smashed by Grubby in a qualifier.
Oh, nice.
That was that.
I have also lost to Grubby. Yeah. I think I'm like 0-3 against Grubby in official matches.
I don't think I've ever had like a higher heart rate than in that match. Like I was. The RTSs are very lonely games, and they become very dark and grim quick when you make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, my understanding, because Blizzard had talked about this in public posts back in the day, that like random teams was a way more popular queue than solo. The vast majority of players played RT.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah.
Yep. People don't actually play that many 1v1 games, and haven't for a really long time. Even really hardcore games like StarCraft, Warcraft. It's like people actually just want to play team games. General.
It's like I've tried to get back into Warcraft 3. And people have gotten so much better. It's scary.
I believe it.
It's like when communities get to fester, and you have just a small group of people keep playing and advance the strategies. And I thought I was good. I come back. It's like you jump into it, and I just got smashed on cooldown. It's crazy how that happens in games. It happened as well with Heroes of Might and Magic 3. That's also a game that I love. And then it's like I tried. There's this modded version of it called Horn of the Abyss. And then it's like 1,000 players online. You queue up for the solo queue system they've built in it, and they are they've solved the game on a whole nother level that I can't even begin to perceive. Sure. And it's very fun to see that kind of grow. I'm wondering if that's going to be League of Legends in like 80 years. I'm going to queue up for a game, and then there's maybe League of Legends still exists, but then maybe I queue up for a game. God bless if I survive to 107. That would be amazing.
Great.
And then I queue up for a league game, and then maybe there's 1,000 players that are still there, and they've figured out strategies that are mind-blowing to me. And then that would be my...
You mean 100 million players still there. League is forever.
That's the plan, right? That is the plan, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Riot really likes League, right? Like, it's still very much a game that they're really invested in, and we're trying to make the best game we can still. So it's like, League's really important.
Yeah, I've been very blessed that the game has developed the way it did. When I wanted to ask you, so it was Warcraft 3. How was the transition for you into Riot Games? Like, how did everything? Like, what was the first call? Like, yo. How was the connection made?
So I heard about League of Legends while I was at Warcraft 3, doing some like Dota, just like it's just a game I play. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I think there's still a post from me on like WC Replays, which is like, it'd be cool to have Dota with matchmaking and stuff. Like that's a good idea. Like that was like League of Legends / Heroes of New Earth. Like, yeah, that would be nice to not have to rely on TDA to get games together. And so as it turns out, we'll bring up Monte Cristo again. His roommate at college was did some games journalism, and so I met him at like an event I was contacted to cast. It was like WCG USA. I don't know, pick a year. And I was there to cast like Command and Conquer and Warcraft 3 or something like that.
Okay.
And so like we did an interview because like StarCraft 2 was like going to be coming out eventually. Like it was finally announced at that point. And so we like interviewed about Warcraft 3 and whatever else. And he knew who I was because like just kind of knew who I was via like he played some Warcraft 3 and again his roommate was the team manager. And so we stayed in touch. And so he got me into the League beta, like during not the super earliest wave, but like relatively early into League closed beta. And played the game a bunch. And then over the course of time, like we kept in touch, whatever, and he urged me to apply to an internship at Riot. I landed a community internship in 2009. I dropped out of college and I interned for about 6 months in 2010. And yeah, it was just like I sent an application. He made sure that the application was actually seen. I interviewed in person because I was in college in San Diego, so it was a pretty short drive to go up to LA and hang out for a bit. And do the interview. And yeah, I mean, I was really, really good at League. I was top 5. I was top 500 on the ladder at one of the beta cutoffs, and then I was number 2 at the ladder the next time they posted rankings. And then I won my next game. It was rank 1. So I was a really, really, really good League player. And yeah, like a friend urged me to apply to the company, and I basically interviewed and talked about how I had a lot of experience doing audio commentaries, these like sort of gameplay, VOD review type things. Back in the pre-YouTube era, you'd zip up an MP3 and a replay file and tell people to sync up the stuff. Yeah, pre-YouTube. It's actually weird seeing commentaries on YouTube because that was not the initial format, and it's just like weird because like this was not how they were made. They're synced up on their own. It's wild. Like here's me, I never put this on YouTube. Someone else did it. Yeah. Anyway, just like I had decent understanding of content creation and whatnot, and I was good at the game, and so sure, go intern, whatever. That turned into the Champion Spotlights, which did quite well, I would say. Yeah. Seems like a pretty good project. Yeah. So I have a lot of experience doing that.
So the internship was the start of the Champion Spotlight. So that was like So you just came in, and what was like the first initial conversations? Like, we need you to create content. Was your idea? Like, how did it all like pan out?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly because this is December of 2009, so it's 13 and a half years ago. But I vaguely remember talking about like, hey, what are the kinds of things that League could do better? We cared about esports a little bit. Didn't know how big the scene would be, of course. But like. The only year I remember having, because I had 3. One was with Mark Merrill, one was with Director of Community, one was the Director of Marketing. And with the marketing guy, was talking about like, you could use skins to make like champions stand out more for esports, like you could team color them. The example he used was bright skins from Quake 3, where you would like force the model colors to be like super lime green so it would stand against the background. You should not do that for esports. That's horrible. You can't tell anything apart there. But like the idea of esports skins and creating sort of video content of like how to play and use the champions. And I think he probably put 2 and 2 together of this is a new champion marketing kind of thing. Like the purpose for it, the business purpose is new champion marketing. As opposed to just like I just want to make videos about champions. Kind of but I think he understood like, oh, there's actually something good here. That is useful. So yes, this thing that you threw a dart onto the wall and hit, you should make those. And so I learned video editing on the job. I think the first one that came out, actually with the release, was like roughly Ezreal. I remember starting on Pantheon or Grog or something when like those champs first came out, and it took a lot of fish because scripting and VO editing and just like they were literally every single piece. Spotlights? Every single piece of Champion Spotlights for the first like 2 years, every single piece of that was me. Wow. Outside of like literally low levels in German and French and stuff. So yeah, I would capture footage. I would write a script of like, here's how we're going to describe the abilities. Here's how we're going to describe the gameplay stuff that we saw. Here's lessons we're going to teach. Here's the room page we're going to show you and the master page we're going to show you. And then I would edit the footage together. I would edit the script to it. I would write and be like, okay, Sivir's Q is boomerang play, but it's like, yep, okay, this lines up with, I would just like sort of mumble to myself, like, yep, this lines up with the gameplay footage. Okay, cool. All right, I would record in an echoey ass conference room. We had no good audio recording spaces or whatever, so they sound really, really bad. So I did every single piece of those, uploading to YouTube, even that little piece like that, and getting all the subtitles in there. And time stamping them, so we get the subtitles back, and then I have to timestamp them all. It was important if I could already get the timestamps in before I set the subtitles for localization, because that way we wouldn't have to copy and paste the timestamps into German and French and Polish. They would just already be there. So like that was part of the workflow. So make sure you timestamp it in time. I mean, I could go on with stories about Champ Spotlight, but it's been 2.5 hours, so I feel like I'll have to go for too long in that.
Oh, that's amazing. I had no idea that you did all of the work in the beginning. How large was the company back then? Like how many people? Did you remember?
Probably in like 30 to 40 people in the office, I guess. So the one thing that makes me sad is so I have an employee ID number, but that ID number counts when I was counts full time only.
Okay.
So I am just over 100.
Okay.
But I joined 7 months before. Damn it! It should be in the 70s or something. So I'm like sad. It matters for no reason, right? It's purely my own head because no one else cares what my employee ID is. But it's just like, oh, I actually joined at like number 52. But instead it's 100 something.
No, I understand why you want. That's important. Because I also like those small, like, it's like I play a lot of games on PlayStation, and I love chasing trophies. I like collecting shit. I like finishing games 100%. I feel like this is in that sphere, you know. It's like a title of some sort, you know. I get it.
Yeah, I have a 7-digit Steam ID, which like back when I was playing Counter-Strike Source was like it's 7, whatever. Like 6 is cool, but like now it's like 11-digit Steam IDs, right? Or like 10 or whatever. So it's like actually, but I was on Steam first.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Do you like the challenger system in League? Because I love it. I get way too distracted by it. Because
oh yeah, I mean it's just fun seeing little stat trackers and whatnot. You know, show off what are my coolest trophies. The friend group that I used to play a lot of League with, a lot of them have kind of turned out for the recent past, whatever. It's like, oh, what if we just did challenge runs together and like we played all Freljord champions? That I haven't really gotten back in the League yet. I mean, some stick around, but some haven't. So it's like, okay, well. But yeah, like that's just a fun thing to do, right? Like having things to look forward to that's not just my LP goes up, because your LP can't always go up, right? The game is fair, and we can't just inflate ranks forever, right? We can't put everyone in Legend League. You know, there has to be some disparity there. Someone has to be gold and silver and bronze and iron. So having things to work toward that aren't just LP go up, that like the number only can go forward, but you can like target what you care about and then display what you care about. Like that's a good thing, and like challenges are a good thing to do. Like there's definitely like important service to do there. I'm glad you like them, because I think it's a really important system.
No, I've always been very addicted to any like achievement systems. I'm a completionist, which is it's also kind of a toxic trait, because I can't start games without feeling the need to complete them. It kind of gnaws at the back of my mind. It's like I start off God of War Ragnarok, I can't put it away. So I'm very careful when I'm during busy times. I don't start out playing new games because I feel the need to complete it for some reason. And I feel the same about the challenges in League. For example, now I mentioned before I played the 2 Aurelion Sol games, and I made sure that I'm playing these normal games and I'm inviting people. And I was like, we're doing the Targon. We are playing Targon champs.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. The theming's fun.
No, for sure. To bring it back to the beginning of your time at Riot, so for me, when I felt like League was such a big deal was when back in season 2, a lot of the managers, they got some inside information about how Riot is going to make LCS happen, LEC happen, and that just opened my mind. And I was like, it's no longer this thing where like the top end are streaming and COG are streaming and HotshotGG has the viewership and so forth and TSM. This is my opportunity to do something, and it really after that, I knew League is going to happen. It's going to be the real deal. I'm going to put all my energy into it. When for you, since you joined the company, you interned for 6 months, was there a specific point you were like, holy shit, League of Legends is going to become fucking massive?
A little bit. So, I mean, I don't know to what degree, but like, I remember like reading positive forum posts about how they enjoyed the game in like early 2010. I was like, yeah, cool. People really like the game. That's nice. And just like reading them out loud to people nearby. I specifically remember tracking Xfire user data. I don't remember what Xfire was, but it was like gamer. I mean, it was Discord adjacent, right? Think about what Discord does with like its community features. Like Xfire is kind of like that. It's a messaging system. I think you could do voice chat. It tracked what you were playing, right? It was a gaming oriented, messaging service. And so it would post its charts of like what are people playing. And watching League like go from not on the list to like number 10, number 9, number 8, and it's like, yo, I woke up today, League had 1/3 the players of Call of Duty. We're up to 10% of World of Warcraft. And just like, we're up to 1/3 of World of Warcraft. We're up to what? we have more players in the World of Warcraft, and it's like, wow, like just like watching that ratchet up. Like that was the one time I remember like tracking how we're doing, and like watching that kind of track upwards. And then it was like little things like, okay, so at what point is League going to be the generic game people make fun of instead of it being WoW, right? Because like, oh, people make fun of Call of Duty, they make fun of World of Warcraft, because like, you know, the previous generation, it was like WoW was from like what 2000, I don't know, 5 to forever.
Yeah.
But like WoW was the big game of my, you know, late teen, young adult years. And then into my 20s, the 30s has been League of Legends, and like seeing people switch to, oh, League is the game that non-gamers make fun of because gamers play League of Legends, or you know, just gamers in general being like, yes, League of Legends is the game, and it's like entering the cultural zeitgeist point where like everyone knows what League of Legends is. Everyone, not literally, right? But like that, like that's wow, you really made it. So it's like they're like the 2 points of like an objective measure of what do people who have Xfire installed on their computers play, which is of nebulous value, but was like it was an interesting scoreboard and the best scoreboard we had time. At least as like, you know, generally just kind of looking at stuff. But then also just like see the change of like, oh no, League of Legends is just the game that people talk about. Like that's really cool. And like obviously other like really gigantic games, like, you know, Minecraft is huge and Fortnite is really huge, especially. And so like, okay, maybe it was WoW, then it was League, then it becomes Fortnite, whatever. But like it was cool to like be like, oh, that's the game. Like that's really weird. And it's like, oh, I've been there the entire time. I've been playing it the entire time. I was League player before it was the League player. Like that's kind of cool.
No, for sure. No, I kind of also feel that way, but maybe to a lesser degree because I came a little bit later. Like I started playing in 2010 on the North American server because there was no server in Europe back then, and I've played ever since. It's like I got hooked on the game, and it's been very exciting to just be a part of the like to be in a world that is constantly growing and to see like that unfold like in front of my eyes. And for that I feel eternally grateful, because it's so hard to sometimes predict beforehand which games is going to happen to and which not. I feel like in the context of World of Warcraft, I think it was so hyped due to the reputation Blizzard had built up for itself with like Lord of Destruction and Frozen Throne, and everything that Blizzard touched at that time was just so amazing. And then World of Warcraft, I remember the ads with Mr. T and all that jazz. And
oh yeah,
that was also like playing those games and seeing that unfold. Like that is it's so hard to like those experiences I will never forget. I think that's truly something else. And I think also looking at League of Legends, I feel so fortunate as well that the World Championship last year was so exciting, and that I still feel love for the game, you know? I really still love League of Legends.
It's a great game.
League of Legends is fucking good. I really
like
it.
It's really cool.
I have this trend that I always do with my guests here, is that I ask a question. I basically ask the guest to ask a question to my future guest without knowing the guest.
Oh, okay.
And the question that I got, this is a very silly question, but I have to carry on the tradition. The question that I got is, which is your favorite Pokemon?
Oh, my brain initially went to like the initial 3 starters of, you know, Bulbasaur, Charizard, Squirtle. I think I was always like a Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard kind of guy.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think if there's like anything that like supplants that for me. I'm not sure there is. Like I know there's like other legendary Pokemon and stuff. That's cool, whatever. But like I think it's just Charizard. I'm pretty sure my favorite Pokemon is Charizard.
I think that's cool. Charizard is gangster. Yeah. I like the shiny version of Charizard too. It's sick. The black version.
Actually,
of it.
Sorry. I need to take that back because obviously there is a correct answer. As in the LCS Spring finals, a fan, I don't know if it's blurry or not or whatever.
No,
but,
I see the
a fan gave a fan gave me and Azale. It's actually Dark Doug Trio and regular Doug Trio. So as well as Diglett and Dark Diglett. So we were given Diglett and Doug Trio cards. So you know, if I'm answering as Pokemon, you know, like initially, I think for many years it would have been Charizard, but there's just too obvious of an answer here with it being, Diglett, Dugtree, or really the Doug duo, me and Azael. But it kind of has to supplant it. So there you go. It took me too long to get there. I'm sorry, but it's thankfully. I mean, I literally have them on like the odds of that. By the way, right? Of like, I'm gonna ask my next guest a random question for Pokemon, and I literally have them right here. That's a little fortunate. What if I can ask a question that good?
Now the ball passes on to you. Now you need to ask a question for my future guest, which could be who knows? I don't have it planned.
I know. Yeah. Who's your favorite esports player? Not necessarily League of Legends. I mean, if it is, but try on League. But I want to know who your favorite esports player is and why. Like, what's your favorite memory? Like, what made you a fan of them? Why are they your favorite?
Okay, that's a good one. I hope my next guest will be esports related, or maybe not.
Oh,
it will make it even more interesting.
Yeah, fine. If it's not esports, regular sports, right? Or if it's not regular sports, like just any kind of celebrity, then that like if you read the room, if they're not a gamer, it's like, oh, okay, here's someone that I admire or I'm a fan of or whatever.
They've looked up like Forbes 30 under 30, and they've seen some.
There you go.
Play there
they just pick one. The big Abraham Lincoln fans,
On my end now, Phreak, we've been talking for 3 hours. Time has been flying. I wanted to ask you: is there something that you would like to bring up? Something that we haven't covered? Something that that we've missed? I've missed.
I don't know. This is gonna be kind of random and tangential. I don't know. It is weird. Like this is gonna be a tangent, really. How much communities at large, and I understand why, because it's hard to get the amount of like clarity that you're desiring. But like people are very quick to just be like, oh, this organization does X, or like this person does Y. Mm-hmm. And you like basically you do never have the like right level of clarity going on to actually speak this way. So for example, when you got flack because you weren't banning Yumi, I was like, well, actually, drafts where we don't ban Yumi are better than drafts where we do. And this is not to like blame your support player necessarily, but it's like, oh, it's actually the support's fault because you can't play Lulu. Maybe not, or it's actually, and it's just like you don't know enough to like try to say, oh, here's what the actual problem was, and yet they'd be like, wow, FedEx so bad, or wow, Yamato so dumb, or who can we witch hunt or whatever, or like, wow, Riot just loves Yasuo. It's like, who is Riot? Like, who is this Riot that loves Yasuo? Like, do you want to say the design direction doesn't nerf Yasuo enough? Like do any level of and we're on the internet where you can just like type things and press enter and it goes up on Twitter or Reddit or whatever. But like the amount of critical thinking just feels very, very low. Where it's like Riot is a corporation. Like humans make choices, right? Like humans are what makes the company work. Period. Without humans, nothing happens. And so it's like, do you want to name a certain person? Like, do you want to say that the person who sets direction did a bad job? Do you want to blame a certain designer? Do you want to blame oversight? Like, I don't know. Even try getting a single step, deeper, basically. And then also just like accepting that. I mean, the ironic thing is, even though you can people, is the whole team matters. I don't think there's a single change I can take credit for, like individually, where it's like, I did this all by myself. I think, maybe, like I think the closest I can do is I think I pitched Lee Sin buffs for 13.3 and implemented them, but my change list was iterated on based on feedback I got. So even though I suggested the change and iterated the change and implemented the change, it still wasn't my change. If I was a lone dev on League of Legends, it wouldn't be the same buff. And that's like a very small thing where like Lee Sin gained 1.5% win rate. It's not a very big deal. Like, I don't know, overhauling items or adding a preseason or adding a new champion or who knows what. It's like, okay, yeah, you can't possibly know who all the people were who worked on this, but also it was human beings who did something, like, and if you're not willing to do some level of the work to figure out who those people were, why are you just like blankly claiming X company or group is bad? You don't even know who those people are. It's like using a different example of like, who are the humans working on Diablo 4? And who are the humans who worked on Diablo 2? Like the humans, like Blizzard Entertainment is making both those games, or made both those games. And I played a lot of Diablo 2. I'm looking forward to Diablo 4. I played some of Diablo 3. It was fine. But like, no, who are the humans who worked on those games? Like, if you're a fan, do you know who those people are at all? Okay, no, there's a company. The same company's behind them. That's nice. There's a corporation with the same title. But the humans are entirely different, or maybe not. Do you know, right? And it's like, well, the company owns the trademark and decided to bring the trademark back. And these humans were inspired by the work of Diablo 1, 2, and 3 and wanted to follow in those footsteps, right? Like, there's lineage, even if the humans aren't the same people. But like, as consumers of media, like, if you're gonna trash on stuff, I don't know, the humans are the ones doing the stuff. Like, least you could do is figure out who those people are. That's my weird tangent. It's not really well formed, but just like a thought I've had for a while. That there you go. There's my rant.
No, I can relate to it. I think the first initial example was definitely good because there's so many layers to it. It's like, it could be, the support player maybe doesn't play a champ, but then it could be maybe tied to practice. Maybe practice was bad because of X things. It's like we had players that had COVID.
Did we not prioritize Lulu correctly?
And then maybe we just were late because of the meta change. Maybe there was something else. Like, there's so many layers to it. And that's why I always refrain from talking bad about any player that I ever worked with or anyone that I work with, because it is so out of context that it is unfair to put my own personal perspective through that lens where everyone can judge it. It's just completely unfair to the situation because the context is completely lost. And the context is all of these hours that we've spent together and worked together as humans, as you mentioned, and every action was filtered through a lot of critical thinking and a process that we went through as a group. So that context is so important, and I think that's often lost. My impression generally that I think, especially in the day of social media, I think a lot of what people say is just talk. It's kind of like how someone shouts at the TV that the football player made a fucking big mistake. Oh, he kicked the ball. He's terrible. Sub him out. I think a lot of it is just talk, and you kind of have limited understanding, and you're trying to force all of the information through that little hole of understanding, and it comes out as Riot Games doesn't know what they're doing. Everything is terrible.
Yeah. And it's like, and all these conversations is like incredibly surface level, right? So it's accepting that like there was never going to be any depth here, right?
Yes.
In any like. What I've got like follow in fields on Twitter, and then it's like, some PhD is gonna post a Twitter thread about like something they thought about. I'm like, cool, you actually reasoned out an opinion, and this is interesting to read about. But like outside of like, here's some cute cat pictures, there's not a lot of value on like the rest of like of any other discussion on like Twitter or Reddit or whatever, right? It's like these are all people with no context, who are. The weird thing is, it's not like people can't discuss things with no context, right? Like, hey, I don't mind surface level discussions on stuff. Like, hey, what game did you enjoy? What movie did you like watching? What TV show did you watch? Like, that's wonderful. It's human conversation. That's great. Like, not everything is deep. But if you're gonna be like, yeah, dude, the real problem with Fnatic is it's like as soon as you try to go a level deeper, like you're probably instantly trolling.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to be like, I liked or didn't like something, or this looked bad to me or whatever. Like, that's fine, of course, right? Or making flat quality judgments, like the CGI on this TV show like looked pretty bad. Like, yeah, that's true. But you're like, yeah, they're not paying enough for CGI. It's like, you don't know that. You don't know what their process was. You don't know how many people worked on it for how long. What. Yeah, you could say the result wasn't very good, but as soon as you're like, they didn't pay enough, or they rushed it out the door, or their oversight wasn't strong enough, it's like, you have no idea about those things. Like, stop making up causes. That's the TLDR, right? Is like, people make up causes for things instead of accepting that like their view on something is surface level, and that's fine. Just say your surface level thing. Like, hey, Fnatic looked bad in the split. Yeah, great. It's really so and so's fault because they couldn't sign. It's like, you don't know that. Stop.
No, for sure. No, I think the scariest thing is. I've used Reddit for a very long time, and reading the League of Legends subreddit on a topic that I know so well is very scary in terms of the information I've consumed about topics that I don't know so much. That scares the shit out of me. It's like, what kind of
wait,
shit
am I trusting
opinion?
any of this? Yeah, exactly.
What kind of shit opinion have I collected somewhere else without just knowing, which is inherently
That's scary.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to be in some kind of echo chamber, right? Like, this is welcome to moderation and upvoting and downvoting is every community will eventually trend towards an echo chamber. Like it can't not when you're allowed to just like vote with a majority, and it's like, oh well, dissenting voices just leave, and now those downvoted posts aren't even there anymore. Like you can't even sort by controversial because they've just left the community entirely. So like, well, sorry, like you don't even get to see those opinions anymore. So it's like being really really aware of that and being identify like what you're actually exposed to is pretty valuable.
Yeah. I guess that must be very strange as well to find the balance as a company to understand what is the loudest voice and what is the actual perception of the consumers. Like threading that line must be very difficult.
Yeah, Reddit should not be doing virtually anything for like influencing balanced opinions. Like that's nice. You're a very very hardcore audience who's mostly skewed North America. Well, you are not representative of League of Legends players. Randomized surveys help. Aggregate player data like pick rate, ban rate, win rate stuff, like that's useful. That's not going to get influenced by Reddit, whatever. It's like finding better ways to get opinions than like who posted on Twitter, who's making threads on Reddit, who's streaming on Twitch. Like there's all better sources than that, right? So okay, yeah. There can be some value extracted, right? There's some value in having discussion, but these people who are not thinking about the game for a living, in almost any case, if they are, there are other places than on Twitter, almost always. Or if they are, it's because they're unemployed and not thinking about that stuff for a living anymore, right? They're looking for work. Someone who wants to hire them to be a coach, and they're going to talk about their coaching philosophies, but they're clearly not good enough to get hired, so their coaching philosophies might be bad. This is not subtweeting you or anything else. It's just like, like that might have sounded, that's not the goal. But it's like, by definition, in a lot of cases, if you could do it, you do it. So maybe, this is me with my like design opinions for the last 10 years, but then actually being a game designer is like, I can do it. My opinions aren't all horrible. But that's actually what I find really fun is just like move the tangent of, again, is like finding people who are like making their own games and then posting videos about it on YouTube. Like there's a guy who does like Deltarunes / Undertale videos. I'd never known this guy before, but he's like, hey, here's a break from the mold. I'm talking about this game I'm designing, and I'm like, this is the first video I've seen of you. This video is great. I don't care about your Undertale commentary, but you're talking about game design. That's cool. And like walking through his experience, like making a game. And it's like really actually kind of cool. And it's like that's valuable. It's like cool. You're speaking to your area of expertise. You're making content where what you're talking about what you have run into. And you're not pretending what other people are doing, right? You're not ascribing values and thought process to other people. You're telling me what you're doing and what you have learned. Like, great. Like even all the preambles out of the way, where it's like, this is not gospel for everything, but here's how your process went. That's really cool. Great. And if you're a fan of a thing, you can never have that context. It's I'm on that side looking in. Here's what I've seen. And then as soon as they try to get more than service level, it just gets awkward.
No, for sure. I feel like it's like I'm so happy we live in a day where passion can be monetized because it's so infectious.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that it's like there's so many valuable sources of information, and sometimes I go into these rabbit holes. It's like I'm watching this man do blacksmithing, and I don't want to fucking do blacksmithing, but I can just
me either. But it's cool.
It's cool because you can see the passion shine through, and it's very obvious that the man has expertise and has a level of proficiency that has a lot of time and effort and blood, sweat, tears behind it, and that's so infectious, And I'm very happy that that's available if you look a little bit deeper, for sure.
Yeah.
And we have the access to the world's largest library. It's if you dig a little bit deeper, and there's so much good stuff out there. I think sometimes that's what's scary about social media. I feel that everything is so skewed towards negative things, and I feel like often people don't have enough time, or they don't have enough skin in the game to make their own opinion, so they just latch on to what has momentum. And I feel like the negative thing often has momentum, because
I think that's true. You think about how algorithms work with engagement, and it's like people negative things and involve it. Like That's true. I remember in college taking a course, and one of the things I remember learning from it was that like attack ads, like negative political ads, have a very strong impact in like biasing votes towards your favor, but they also have an overall impact of lowering total votes.
Oh wow!
That like if you want to win, you should attack. If you both attack each other, there are less total votes. People just don't vote anymore. To again, a degree. Obviously, people still vote to some degree, but like that's how you measure it. It's like turns out attack ads are good and also bad. And right, like they influence the most emotions that way. And then I don't think. Here's the thing: I think it's totally reasonable to have opinions on things. If you don't know enough, that's fine. Just like, no comment, whatever. And and most of us, we live in democracies where you're asked to vote on stuff, and it's like, well, I haven't researched the candidate very well, but they have this letter next to their name, so it's more likely it's gonna agree with what I agree with. Okay, let's move on. In case you're busy. That's just like that's how it works. Sorry. How long am I spending researching California positions? Not that long. Spend a couple hours on the day of like, okay, let's make sure my ballot's good. Okay, I'm spending more of it than the average person. I feel comfortable with this moving forward. But yeah, then it's like, okay, do you want to spend time researching economics policies? Do you want to spend time researching labor policies? Do you want to spend time thinking about zoning and labor laws and housing and whatnot? And it's like, well, maybe, but if you are an expert, then it's not like your duty to, but it's like, if you are an expert, then okay, socialize your expertise, or hope that can happen somewhere, because then you like having experts actually socialize opinions is how you actually create change, and that's try if you can.
No, for sure. I can't help but agree. I think I always try to challenge it when I have a humble stream, and whenever I see that people repeat my opinions, but with like in a very surface level way, I always try to challenge them, just to try to make my own peace with it somehow, because I don't want to create, even though it's probably impossible, I'm hoping to grow in a direction, and I understand that there will be a level of someone just taking something that I said and making that their own, and then just spreading it without knowing what it is, because I've had that interaction from other places, but I feel like that's almost impossible to kind of prevent, because I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel smart and feel like they know something that no one else does, and they don't have the time to invest and to really deep think about it themselves, so they just move on with that piece of information. And I can admit that I do that about some topics. Like I listen to some podcasts, all of a sudden I'm parroting some shit that I heard there, and but
at least you're parroting the opinion of an expert, right? It's better than parroting what you saw on Twitter from some random. For sure.
Okay. That's a good note to end it on.
Yeah.
Phreak, is League of Legends dying?
No, of course not. League is great.
Thank God. I believe League of Legends is great too. Phreak, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Me too. Thank you.
I hope we can do this again sometime. Maybe after 1 year of balancing, we can talk again, because I feel like we could talk for a very long time. But I'm worried that I'm not going to do it justice, because I'm holding back yawns and I want to be polite and I don't want to be rude. 3 a.m. is beginning to clock in, and I am pretty sure that I'm keeping other people awake in the house. But this has been amazing. I truly appreciate Phreak. I wish you all the best. I will post this on Tuesday somewhere there. I will do the timestamps, all the good jazz. This has been amazing. Thank you very much once again, brother.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Fantastic.